how they got there. The monetary issue is a real issue. And as I've said before, we follow the money. So we work with our partners at the Treasury Department to trace where the money came from, how these individuals paid for the training they received or the platforms they were using, and also how these individuals collectively got together in whatever groups they were on whatever social media sites they were on, to utilize clickbait to make money
Bingo.
for their ideology. And so to trace all of those, we are using, not just in Charlie's investigation, but others, lawful process and serving 2703D orders on any entity that is related in any way financially to any of these criminal acts of violence. And we are going to hold them accountable with our partners at the Department of Justice.
Excellent. I would love to stay abreast of that, and just, we must get to the bottom of it. We must follow the money. Someone is funding this discourse. Do you believe, obviously there are people here, unfortunately American citizens, that may be engaged in that, but do you also believe that some of this may be coming from overseas?
Yes.
Okay, let's get to the bottom of it, and let's make it stop.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask you about the Dobbs decision. So we know that it was leaked in May of 22, and then we had the Marshal Service say, we found nothing in January of 23. I find that absolutely mind-boggling, that we can't figure out who leaked that opinion. We know it was done in attempts to undermine the process, and then the intimidation of the justices occurred after that. Tell me what you can do as FBI director to help us get to the bottom of what happened and actually hold someone accountable for their actions.
So I can't speak to what the marshals did and how they conducted their investigation. I can tell you, generally speaking, the FBI has taken over the investigation on the leak because it was such a detrimental leak.
So you commit to getting to the bottom of it?
We are utilizing the full resource of the FBI as we usually do on leak investigations, and we will make sure our results are public at the appropriate time.
We need answers. I want to talk about child sexual exploitation. Thank you for making protecting our youth your top priority. We know that that is the greatest gift that we have. That is our greatest treasure here in the United States, is the next generation. And finally, we have an FBI director that is putting that at the top of his list. Can you tell me the steps and the different initiatives? I've heard you talk about a couple of them. You've mentioned 764 amongst other things. Tell me what you're doing, and specifically, I want to know about when it comes to sextortion. So as a parent who is raising children right now, teenagers, and you're looking at what's happening, whether people are snapping photos and then what's happening online, I have had a number of parents sit in front of me telling me terrible, heartbreaking stories about their children ultimately taking their own life because of being blackmailed. I want to know, what steps are you taking to get to the bottom of that and to absolutely end this? If this were happening in a storefront, Mr. Director, that store would be shut down, no matter where it was, coast to coast, and yet we continue to allow these things to happen, and we've got to have a more targeted approach when we're looking at this. And so what are you doing to protect children, and specifically sextortion?
So in our VCAC initiative, our Violent Crimes Against Children is our umbrella enterprise operations hub for things like Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Not Forgotten and Operation Justice. And in things like that, those are producing the results that I told you about: 1,500 child predators arrested, 300 human traffickers arrested, 4,700 children identified and saved, a 35% increase from year to date last year alone. But specifically on your sextortion question, Senator, that is a problem that we are seeing explode on generative AI in private sector and social media companies. And what we're doing is engaging with NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children, because this one stat alone should probably cause great pause. They have seen a 1,325% increase in generative AI leading to sextortion and child sexual abuse. That cannot be countermanded by the FBI alone. We have embedded people at NCMEC and have a great partnership with them. But what we need to do is what we did in the month of May, and we're doing it over and over again. We arrested 400 individuals in 1 month, in 1 month search.
Wow,
These
thank you.
individuals have prioritized the agents and intel analysts, have never left that mission. They're doing multiple missions at the same time. That's what the FBI is called upon to do day in and day out, and we won't stop doing two things at once. But we need help from social media companies. We need help from the private sector and the internet service providers that allow this generative AI to be hosted on their platforms. We have got to get a resolution on that with our partners in Congress and the private sector.
Well, we are definitely committed to working on that. I know the people up here. So you let us know what tools you need, and I know we've got several ideas that we look forward to pushing forward. In my remaining 2 minutes, I want to talk to you about your historic results when it comes to crime. In particular, we've seen here in DC just a total transformation. You mentioned earlier 60% down in gun crime, 70% down in carjackings. You said 50% down in homicides, to name a few. We have a success story, and we appreciate President Trump's leadership on all of this. We have a success story in Alabama where the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, so ALEA, they just marked their 1-year anniversary of the Metro Area Crime Suppression Unit. There in Montgomery, it is a coordinated effort with ALEA, with our Attorney General, with Montgomery PD, and our sheriff, Montgomery County sheriffs. They've seen a 30% drop in violent crime and a 19% drop in overall crime. So it is actually producing results. It's this type of interagency connectivity that I think ultimately is going to lead us to safer cities and safer streets. I know that you are committed to that, committed to working with your partners. You said earlier you've elevated sheriffs and police officers there to the 7th floor. Thank you for doing that. I am grateful for the men and women of Alabama in uniform that have made this happen, and want to know, how is the FBI working to collaborate in these types of ways across our country to make sure that we have even greater success stories to tell?
Well, the collaboration's happening at our Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. We bring 4,000 students through our Redstone Arsenal for training every year. In terms of our future plans, in the next few years, we will bring 13,000 students a year through Alabama's Redstone Arsenal. And by students, I mean FBI employees, I mean sheriffs, I mean police chiefs, I mean cops, I mean intel analysts, because that is their future gem of how we're going to train local law enforcement. And we're so thankful for the dedication of resources to that facility. And I encourage everyone to go down there and take a look, because if you want to see where the FBI is going and how we're going to train the future, it's happening at Quantico and Redstone.
We are very proud of it, and thank you so much for your leadership.
Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, I want to start off where we left off last time. I asked you whether you had any knowledge or discussions about removing FBI officials and installing political personnel before you were confirmed to that position. And I wonder, did you then understand or have conversations with the White House about the intentions to do so?
Before I was confirmed,
Yes, sir.
did I have discussions with the White House to remove FBI personnel?
Yes.
No.
So you're saying that you had no discussions with the White House before you were in the position about the removal of any personnel from the agency?
As I was preparing for my confirmation hearing, I had numerous discussions involving the type of people that would be employed, and that those that were failing to meet the mark at the FBI would no longer be employed if I were
And I'm
confirmed.
assuming that mark had to do with loyalty to the Trump administration.
No, you're wrong.
Okay. I'd like to revisit another subject from that hearing. Did you testify, excuse me, you did testify before the grand jury that President Trump had declassified the documents at issue in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. Is that correct?
I don't have the grand jury transcript. That's why I released it. Whatever it says is the best evidence.
You know, that's what you said to Senator Whitehouse, that your grand jury testimony was publicly released. It has not been. In fact, in July, a court denied a news outlet's bid to get that transcript. But the court said quite clearly that you are free to discuss your grand jury testimony. So I ask you again, did you testify before the grand jury that President Trump declassified the documents at issue in the Mar-a-Lago classified document case?
And that is why I took your invitation to work with the department and the court to have that transcript released. And the transcript is the best evidence of what I said then.
So you're saying right now this committee can have access to what you said before the grand jury?
To whatever was released. Under my understanding, Senator,
So
that the Department of
hold on.
Justice
You and I
released.
both understand the law. Let me finish. I understand under Rule 6 of the Federal Rules of Procedure, a grand jury witness, in this case you, is not barred from sharing their grand jury testimony. This is an oversight hearing. This is germane to your integrity and credibility. You know right now whether or not you testified that President Trump declassified the documents at issue in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. Why are you refusing to answer that simple yes or no question right now?
Because the premise of your question is inaccurate, and
There is
why.
no premise to my question, but trying to get to an order of what is truth or not.
How do you How do you know what was asked in the grand jury if you weren't there?
Mr. Patel, this is a mockery you're making of this hearing and simple questions.
It's a
So let
simple
me move on.
question. If you have
Mr.
a
Patel,
transcript,
during
you can
your
read the question,
nomination,
but you don't have
hearing,
it.
you promised that, quote, all FBI employees will be protected against political retribution. When I asked you, are you aware of any plans or discussions to punish in any way, including termination, FBI agents or personnel associated with the Trump administration, you explicitly said under oath that you were not aware of any plans to punish FBI agents associated with criminal investigations of Donald Trump. I don't believe you were truthful. Firing FBI employees based solely on the cases that they are investigating, their case assignments, is illegal, and you know that. A new lawsuit that's been discussed numerous times, filed by 3 FBI officials, alleges that you carried out Donald Trump's campaign of retribution, in quotes, against FBI employees for, quote, failure to demonstrate sufficient political loyalty. One of those plaintiffs has been discussed today, Brian Driscoll. Now, we know 20 years of distinguished service to the FBI before you terminated him. Special agent in charge of FBI's Newark field office, where he operated with distinction. Medal of Valor winner, Shield of Bravery awards. He's a patriot. You terminated Driscoll via a letter dated October 8th, 2025, and in that letter you said that you were firing him pursuant to Article 2 of the Constitution. Well, you're not the President of the United States, and so I'm wondering under what authority you were allowed to terminate him.
That matter is under litigation, and I'm not able to discuss it.
Okay, well, discuss this. Did you have discussions with Stephen Miller about firing this particular person or about his continuance in the FBI?
Not that I recall.
How often do you speak to Stephen Miller?
Frequently on our Homeland Security task forces.
You frequently talk with Stephen Miller about subjects other than Homeland Security task force issues, correct?
I frequently talk to Mr. Miller about Homeland Security task forces.
Has Stephen Miller ever given you his opinions on how to run your agency?
Mr. Miller's interagency operations are invaluable to success of the FBI. That's what we talk about.
So you frequently discuss your job and your responsibilities with Stephen Miller and Pam Bondi, I imagine, as well.
Absolutely. She's the Attorney General.
Understood. Okay. Donald Trump promised to make us all safer. You have pushed out senior FBI agents with decades of knowledge and experience. In fact, this is the first time in FBI history that neither the director nor the deputy director have any experience with the FBI. You've shifted the agency's priorities primarily to pursuing Donald Trump's immigration enforcement agenda. According to ICE data, the Cato Institute, which is a conservative think tank, found that 20% of all agents have been diverted from their work to assist ICE immigration enforcement. 20%. Part of this operation is the work of mass law enforcement who jump out of cars, snatch people off streets at churches, schools, and their jobs and hospitals. Have there been any FBI agents who investigate crimes against children that have been assigned to immigration enforcement, yes or no?
The premise of what you say is entirely
Have there been
false.
any FBI agents who investigate
no.
foreign domestic terrorism?
You don't get to say America is not safer under this leadership.
I am not saying
America
that.
is
You're
safer
making
because of the work of the
presumption-
FBI.
You're making a presumption of premise.
4,700 children.
Sir,
we have seized
you have-
6,000 weapons and
you are not
23,000 violent
denying
felons have
that
been
FBI
arrested.
agents who investigate human trafficking have been reassigned to immigration enforcement. You are not denying that FBI agents who are on the task force that fight against Russian oligarchs have not been reassigned. Public Correction Squad reassigned. People who defend us, defend children reassigned. You're not denying that. I've seen you
FBI
time and
agents
time
don't
again
get reassigned.
attack my colleagues' premises of questions as a way to not answer the question. So let me end with this. I believe you have made our country weaker and less safe. I believe that we are more vulnerable to a major event, and I pray to God it doesn't happen. You've gutted the Bureau of Institutional Knowledge and Expertise. You fired or pushed out seasoned FBI officials, many with more than 20 years of experience, and were working on cases that were critical. You've been purging thousands of serious law enforcement officials who spent their careers keeping us safe, only to lower hiring standards in order to find anyone to replace them. And shockingly, you admitted in this hearing to Senator Coons that it would take 14 years to fill the vacancies at your agency. Many are the result of your purge. 20% of FBI agents are doing low-level immigration enforcement instead of their mission-critical work. You've disbanded entire task forces that stop election interference, foreign influence, public corruption. And who benefits from this? Well, corrupt people benefit from it. Criminals benefit from it. Vladimir Putin benefits from it. And it really makes me wonder who you're looking out for. It makes me think we can't trust you as a nation. You swear to release the Epstein files, but now you're withholding the Epstein files. You claim that you have a suspect in a serious assassination. Whoops, then you don't have a suspect. You know nothing about plans to remove FBI agents, yet you're directly involved in those plans. In the words of an ex-FBI official, you are overseeing, and I quote, generational destruction of the nation's premier law enforcement agency. Mr. Patel, in just 8 months, you have assaulted the institutional integrity of the FBI. But I know FBI field agents. I've worked with them in Newark. No matter how truly bad you are, you can't undermine the legacy of agents who fight every day to keep us safe, but you can tarnish the integrity of the agency and undermine the agency's capacity. I believe you're failing as a leader, and that your failure does have serious implications for the safety and security of Americans and our families. We're more vulnerable to domestic and foreign attack because of your failures of leadership. I don't think you're fit to hand the Bureau, but here's the thing, Mr. Patel. I think you're not going to be around long. I think this might be your last oversight hearing. Because as much as you supplicate yourself to the will of Donald Trump and not the Constitution of the United States of America, Donald Trump has shown us in his first term and in this term, he is not loyal to people like you. He will cut you loose. This may be the last time I have a hearing with you because I don't think you're long for your job. But I'm going to tell you this. I pray for you. I pray for you that you can step up and defend your oath, defend the Constitution, and do a much better job of defending this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you want to say anything?
Yes,
at this
sir.
point?
That rant of false information does not bring this country together. If you want to work on bringing this country, it's my time, not yours.
My God.
If
You're
you
gonna
want to
lecture
talk
me
about
dividing this country,
it is
I
my
follow
time.
you on your social media posts that
It is
tear
my
this country
time
apart.
to
There
address
should be a
your
unifying-
falsehoods.
Oh,
You are an
you can try
embarrassment
all
to the
you
division
want
in this country.
to not
Senator,
take
it is
my
responsibility
time.
for what
You
you
had your
have said.
time.
Sir, you're
Your
making
time
a
is
mockery of this
over.
committee. Sir, you don't tell me my time is over.
You
The
know how
people
far
of New
we've
Jersey
come
tell me
since
what my
you
time
tell-
is.
Senator,
You can't lecture me.
You can tell me
Sir,
my time's over?
You may be the charge of the
I'm not
FBI,
going anywhere.
but I am not afraid of you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Not afraid of you.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Senator Booker, I announced at the beginning of this meeting that this back and forth, talking over each other, doesn't work. And I said if that happened, I asked Patel not to respond, and I was going to give him some time after the senator's time was up to respond. And he has the privilege to do that uninterrupted.
Mr.
So
Chairman,
go-
one point of
Go
order.
ahead, Mr.
I've
Patel.
watched him talk over us, and you've never once criticized him for us not even being able to get our questions out.
Well,
He has been rude and disrespectful to senator after senator.
And when the senators were not giving him a chance to answer, I didn't stop the senator either. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the FBI, under my 7-month leadership, were failing this administration in this country, why do we have 23,000 violent felons arrested this year alone? A a double increase from that time last year. Why is it that we have seized 6,000 weapons? Why have we found 1,500 child predators and arrested them? Why have we have 300 human traffickers in jail? Why have we found and identified 4,700 children? Why have we seized 1,600 kilograms of fentanyl, enough to kill a third of the American public, a 25% increase alone from last year? 88,000 kilograms of cocaine seized, 7,000 kilograms of meth seized, and that's just on our criminal operations in summer heat. How is it possible that we're taking 8 kilograms off the streets of the cities in New Jersey and preventing the deaths of 607,000 people this year alone, a failure of the FBI and my leadership? How is it that we have counterintelligence arrests already this year exceeding the numbers from the entirety of last year? 33% increase in PRC, 83% in Russia, 60% in the CI space as it relates to Iran, and we haven't even talked about CT, the southern border, the northern border.
Before Senator Cruz, I kind of feel like a broken record today. All this interest in FBI termination, yet my colleague showed no intent or interest in when my whistleblowers suffered retaliation over the past years, particularly the past 4 years. Indeed, one whistleblower has alleged that Brian Driscoll's insubordination, whether an agent is on a hot button case or not, they ought to be held accountable for misconduct and weaponization. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I have to say, it used to be that to see theater, you had to go to the Kennedy Center. Now, apparently, you need only go to the Senate Judiciary Committee and see our Senate Democrats berating the director of the FBI, which, okay, it's not, partisan politics is not new in the United States Congress. But what is remarkable is what Senator Booker was berating Director Patel about. He wasn't berating him for failing to do his job, but rather he was furious for Director Patel for successfully doing his job. For 4 years, the Democrats under Joe Biden had an open border that undermined the safety of every single American. They allowed 12 million illegal aliens to come into this country to invade this country, and every single day Americans were murdered, women were raped, children were assaulted by violent criminals that Democrats released. Now, Director Patel, I found Senator Booker's questioning really bizarre. He asked you, have you reassigned FBI agents from human trafficking to immigration issues? Director Patel, are the Mexican cartels that are bringing people illegally into this country engaged in human trafficking?
Yes, sir.
What the hell does it mean to reassign someone from human trafficking to immigration? The greatest human trafficking in the world has been over the last 4 years at our southern border. It is modern day slavery that the Democrats still defend. They still defend those open borders. Mr. Patel, he also said, did you reassign FBI agents from protecting children to immigration? How many children have you found that were victimized by the open borders of the previous administration?
4,700.
4,700. And yet, oddly, I don't hear a Democrat here saying, gosh, thanks for protecting those kids.
35% increase year to date last year.
All right, I want to shift topics. And I want to shift topics to what happened last week. Charlie Kirk was assassinated. He was assassinated because of his political views. We're living in a time of enormous division and tragically hatred, and hatred that manifested in evil that we saw last week. Now, the FBI, working in concert with state and local law enforcement, apprehended what appears to be, in all likelihood, the murderer. And you did so in just 33 hours. So I want to start by just congratulating you and the FBI agents and state and local law enforcement for successfully apprehending the murderer in less than a day and a half. In the wake of that assassination, We have seen far too many people on the left celebrating the assassination. We've seen Democrats, we've seen activists cheering it on. We've seen tragically teachers in high schools, teachers in elementary schools, university professors cheering on the murder of Charlie Kirk. You and I both knew Charlie well. He was a good friend. He was an extraordinary man. And I will say there's a great deal of discussion about what to do about it. Under our Constitution, under the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, speech is protected. And that's true even for vile speech. Someone can stand up and say the most hateful thing, and it's protected by the First Amendment. Nazis and Klansmen can march in the streets, and even though their speech is bigoted and horrible and racist, the First Amendment protects it. Conduct, however, is not protected by the First Amendment, particularly conduct that is violent. Violent conduct that is threatening others, that is harassing others, that is injuring, or in this case, murdering others, is most assuredly not protected by the First Amendment. And so I would encourage you and the FBI to focus on conduct. Now, speech can guide you to those engaged in conduct. And I will say one question that I have and many have, and I recognize this is an ongoing investigation, so I don't want you to say anything that would compromise the investigation. But what can you tell us at this point about what evidence there exists of other individuals who may have had prior knowledge of this assassin's plans to murder Charlie Kirk on September 10th?
Generally speaking, we've interviewed numerous people, family members and friends, including the partner, to provide us with a detailed history of the knowledge he may have had, the suspect may have had prior to. We're still mapping out who, if anyone, was involved as an accomplice. As I said, the investigation is ongoing. We're also speaking to and going to interview numerous individuals online who were part of a chat group that was involved in this heinous assassination. And we're also going to work with our state and local partners out in Utah to find out what community organizations, if any, participated or had any foreknowledge of this information. But it's very much ongoing. I remind everybody that it's not even been a week since Charlie's tragic death.
Is it accurate? It's been widely reported that the assassin's roommate was a transgender man who was transitioning to be female, and it's also been reported that they may have been romantic partners. Is that accurate?
Yes, Senator.
And I assume the FBI is investigating. It has also been reported that there were transgender chat rooms that may have had some awareness of the plan to commit this murder. Is that accurate as well?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
It's been reported that there were chat rooms of transgender activists that indicated some degree of potentially of foreknowledge of this murder.
We're still developing that.
You have any information, the bullet casings had on them both Antifa and LGBT wording on them. Do you have any indication of the source of those engravings and what inspired them?
As to the actual source, we're still developing that.
I want to encourage you in the course of this investigation, absolutely go after anyone who aided and abetted. But I want to more broadly encourage you, follow the money. The violence we are seeing is not purely organic. There is, I believe, significant money that is spreading dissension, that is spreading violence. Antifa. Do you believe Antifa is a terrorist organization?
I believe Antifa is associated with a lot of violence in this country. As to its designation, I'll leave that to the appropriate authorities.
So I would encourage the administration to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization, to go systematically after Antifa. They've committed acts of violence all over the country. And the shell casings have multiple references to slogans that Antifa has popularized. I believe There is considerable money funding it. I would note that I've introduced legislation called the Stop Funders Act. Stop Funders Act would add rioting to the list of predicate offenses under RICO. I believe the money should be tracked and prosecuted under RICO. And both the Antifa and Black Lives Matter riots of a couple of years ago and the pro-open border riots in Los Angeles and other cities of this past year, I believe there was significant money behind those riots. I'm not the only person who noticed at the anti-Semitic protests and violent protests on college campuses that many of the tents all matched. And so I would ask, would it aid your ability to prosecute these matters if Congress passed into law the Stop Funders Act and if rioting was added to the list of predicate offenses for RICO?
Yes.
Talk to me about the efforts of the FBI to go after the funders of the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses, the pro-open border protests in cities, and potential LGBT violence. Talk to me about the efforts to go after the money of those who are funding and promoting violence.
As I've always said, Senator, money doesn't lie, and we've been following the money. And so that's what we're doing, issuing lawful process to organizations involved with criminal activity, because the money's got to come from somewhere and it has to be funded somehow. So we have extensive investigations ongoing into numerous organizations that are related to violent criminal activity.
Cutting off the money will make America much safer, and that is the core job of the FBI. And I thank you for doing your job.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, glad to be on this committee and take our responsibility seriously to conduct oversight of the FBI, obviously one of the most critical law enforcement agencies in the country. As Senator Klobuchar and others on this committee have reminded us, the last several months have provided far too many reminders of the political violence crisis in America today, and the gun violence crisis in America today, including the tragic killing just last week. Director Patel, this committee takes seriously its not just oversight role, but recognizing the FBI's important role in protecting the public from gun violence while respecting constitutional rights. If you recall, this was a significant subject area of my questioning during your confirmation hearing. The Bureau plays a central role in enforcing federal firearm laws, ensuring the accuracy of background checks, and monitoring trends like machine gun conversion devices and lost or stolen firearms. Now, during your confirmation hearing, you pledged that the FBI would enforce firearm laws fully and fairly, consistent with the Second Amendment. Yet we continue to see a sharp rise in lost and stolen firearms reported by federal licensees. Can you point to any measurable enforcement results like arrests, not just arrests, but also prosecutions or task force expansions since you became director?
I'll get those to you, Senator.
Nothing you can share here today?
No, I'll get the full list to you.
You came unprepared today to respond to questions which you knew were important, going back to your confirmation hearing. Now, the Bureau has warned about the public safety threat posed by machine gun conversion devices, which convert semi-automatic weapons to automatic ones. Can you at least reference what resources you're dedicating to this threat?
Absolutely, Senator. Part of tracking ghost guns, as you alluded to, is having a sustainable database, which is hubbed out of our CJIS division in West Virginia. And we've allocated more resources so that FFLs can track and trace firearms that are stolen and make sure they don't get into the population. That's one of my primary concerns, that we don't want stolen weapons anywhere near anything.
But the numbers continue to go up as reported by federal licensees. Let me get to my next question on this topic. You previously stated that you hadn't reviewed Fix NICS, a federal law that improves reporting to the National Criminal Background Check System. 8 months into your job, what concrete steps have you taken to ensure that NICS records are complete, accurate, and timely?
That's actually a great question that we have dedicated a lot of resources to, again, at CJIS. The NICS system has been trying to get to 100% within 15 minutes. We are currently at 93%, with 87% of those being responsive in less than 60 seconds. So we got more
Do you
work to do.
think additional resources would be helpful in getting to 100%, or do you still argue that less resources are necessary to get from 93 to 100?
No, I just think we have to work on how fast our actual infrastructure processes these things.
On to a question about resources. The FBI's core mission is to counter terrorism, espionage, and major criminal threats. Now, recent large-scale reassignments to immigration enforcement or politically motivated investigations cause me concerns that other critical missions are being neglected. One example, in March of this year, you created a Tesla-related task force and diverted personnel from the domestic terrorism operations section to work on that task force. What risk analysis justified that decision, and do you still consider domestic violent terrorism to be a lower priority?
Any form of terrorism, domestic or international, is the highest priority at the FBI. And when you
Why
say,
divert resources away from those missions?
I don't believe that's accurate. We did not divert resources away. When cars were exploding and people were being set on fire, I directed resources to address it.
Well, then I'll suggest in your follow-up, and we can make this more explicit in our questions for the record, that you provide the accurate information about the diversion of resources. Because, again, when I understand that you authorize large-scale agent reassignments from counterintelligence and cybercrime to not just immigration cases, but others, it has an impact on the other priorities like nation-state threats and ransomware investigations. Moving on to a different subject area. Safeguarding our elections is a core FBI responsibility. The public needs confidence that election security work is driven by facts and free from political influence. Mr. Director, do you agree with Attorney General Bondi's decision to disband the FBI Foreign Influence Task Force?
The disbanding of that task force did not in any way reallocate or take away resources from that critical mission set.
So then how are you mitigating the risk of foreign actors interfering in U.S. elections heading in?
I've highlighted through our cyber programs, which have seen a 40, 50, 60% increase in arrests for cyber threat actors looking to not just harm our critical infrastructure systems, but also interfere in our elections. We've had multiple arrests this year of individuals who are interfering in that process.
Did the Department of Justice's Election Integrity Task Force seek statewide voter lists and driver's license data?
I can't speak for the Department of Justice.
You're a member of the Department of Justice.
I can
Did
speak
the
for the
FBI play a role in those requests?
Whatever request that we had pursuant to the department's direction were provided
So then you can speak
for the
to
FBI.
those actions.
For the FBI.
So you can speak to those actions.
For the FBI.
So what role did you play in those requests?
Whatever requests we get from the department, I don't have those details in front of me. We provide whatever requests they have.
I have not many details in front of you on a lot of the questions coming from this side of the aisle. So I do hope that there are substantive and accurate responses to our questions in writing. In my time left, Mr. Chairman, I just want to call out a couple of observations. The director before us has tried to explain, I won't say explain, tried to explain how he doesn't need another $500 million to do the job. And specifically that even if the FBI had an additional $500 million, it would take years. I think he referenced 14 years to fill the vacancies. But in the meantime, relying on partnership with local law enforcement to fulfill the mission of the Bureau. As we've discussed in other hearings and in other committees, by the way, given this immigration mass deportation agenda of the administration, the FBI is not the only one leaning on local law enforcement to do the job. ICE has made it clear that they're doing the same. Other law enforcement agencies within DHS is doing the same. So much so that ICE's recruitment, because they're not only not advocating for cuts, they're actually requesting additional dollars and have issues about policy with them. But if ICE's plan to do the job is not just hiring up significantly. They don't seem to have that as a concern, but the FBI does. Both ICE and the FBI are citing partnerships with local law enforcement, which, look, partnership and engagement is great. But having come from local law enforcement at the outset of my public service career, I also know that capacity and resources at the local level are strained, particularly in times like this. And when ICE is going on a hiring spree, and you have local law enforcement agencies worried about their ability to recruit and retain local law enforcement officers and not losing them to the federal government, then our reliance on those local law enforcement agencies is a perilous strategy to take and could undermine local law enforcement's ability to address crime at the local level, whether it's white-collar crime, organized retail theft, violent crime, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in my final minute, I will also suggest this. Director Patel has referenced earlier in the hearing that one of the most significant value addeds of partnering with local law enforcement is that they are the best intelligent source. Is that correct?
For on the ground.
Yet, when local law enforcement is put in a perilous position of being in a role with this mass deportation agenda, which is consistently overreached, has been found to violate the law and the Constitution, and has undermined public confidence in law enforcement, not just by immigrants, by the way, but especially immigrants. When immigrants are victims of crime and are afraid to come forward because they don't know what law enforcement is going to do with their information or not, when immigrants, legal or undocumented, are witnesses to crime and are afraid to come forward with that information because they don't know what's going to happen with their information or not. That undermines the credibility of law enforcement with the community and undermines the intelligence, Director Patel, that you say are the best source of intelligence when it comes to law enforcement. So it's shaky, it's worrisome, and in my opinion, overall, you are failing to live up to the role and responsibility that you have been confirmed to, and I associate with myself with everything Senator Booker said earlier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, before we go to Senator Blackburn, without objection, I want to introduce into the record a recently declassified document thanks to Director Patel. The document is a Director Wray FBI analysis of Nellie Ohr's false statements to the Congress. Ohr never suffered consequences for advancing the phony Trump-Russia narrative and attempting to cover up her involvement in the hoax with false statements. Yet time and again, the American justice system has been weaponized against President Trump and his associates, such as Peter Navarro, with reckless abandon. The DOJ's inaction on Nellie Ohr's criminal referral, despite the obvious incriminating evidence provided in the FBI's own analysis, undermines public trust in the rule of law thanks to Director Wray's utter failure. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Patel, thank you ever so much for being with us today. And I want to thank you for your commitment to fight violent crime in Memphis. And when you first came to meet with me before your hearing here, I gave you the stats on Memphis, Tennessee, and their crime rates. And then you committed then and again at your confirmation to help us. You have been true to your word, and we are very, very grateful. Operation Viper has been such a success. The 500 arrests are important. These are gang members and gang leaders out of Memphis, Tennessee. There are over 100 gangs in Memphis. So the impact of these arrests, the impact of 100 indictments of these gang members. And now we have a U.S. Attorney's Office that will actually prosecute violent crimes and actually take up and prosecute federal gun crimes. This is helping to make Memphis safe again. And yesterday at the White House, to have the president announce the second phase of this with bringing in the Guard, and we've got ATF and DEA and the U.S. Marshals and Homeland Security, and the work that you and General Bondi and the president have done is so appreciated by the people of Memphis, Shelby County, West Tennessee, and I am ever so grateful for the work you've done. You know, one of the things, as we talk about Memphis and what a vibrant and wonderful historic city it is, it's important to realize Memphis is one of the logistics hubs in our country. You have I-40, which goes East Coast to West Coast. You have the Port of Memphis. You have FedEx. You have all 5 Class A railroads that are there, as well as so many companies that are important to Memphis. And I have found it so interesting that some of my colleagues want to complain about agents being taken out of the DC office and actually put to work in the field because they've been needed in the field. And you can look at the stats from Operation Viper and see the difference that they have made. And we so appreciate that. I do want to drill down just a little bit on the issue of cargo theft, which ties into the logistics hub in Memphis. We've got a lot of companies that go through there. IMC is a big logistics company. People in Memphis know what it takes to keep America moving. But what a lot of people may not realize is that many of these criminal gangs have been focused on cargo theft. This is how they pay for their activities. So in addition to the carjackings and the home robberies and the smash and grabs and some of the human and sex trafficking, they've gotten into cargo theft. And cargo theft in Memphis has increased over 5,000%. 5,000%. That's what you saw with a Biden administration who wouldn't drill down on this. So having these agents out in the field, having an interagency approach is something that is going to help us with getting our hands around this cargo theft. So talk for just a minute about what your team has done there and the importance of having that interagency approach.
Absolutely, Senator. So Operation Viper nests under Operation Summer Heat, and in multiple cities and mid-major cities across the country, we have surging resources based on crime. And Memphis, as you know, Senator, had the highest per capita homicide rate in the country, and that was simply unacceptable. And so what we did was what we call phase 01 of operations at the president's direction. We went into some of these cities quietly to collect the intelligence that was necessary to start these operations, to start seizing these firearms, which we seized, I think, over 115 firearms off the streets, to start taking narcotics off the streets, and also to infiltrate the gang network, this criminal street gang network that is providing these guns and drugs to the public in these communities, allowing for these shootings. And so what the FBI is good at, what the FBI is great at, is partnering with our local authorities in places like Memphis and Miami, and Chicago, and so many other cities across the country to start the work, because you can't do the work on a dartboard basis. You need ground level intelligence. And that's what we do working with our state and local law enforcement. And the results, I think they said over 100 indictments federally just in this 3-4 month surge. And now we're going to go in there with more resources to finish it.
And we are grateful for that. And I think it's so important for my colleagues, what we have seen in Memphis. You mentioned something very important. Your agents go in and they go in quietly. There was no press conference. There was no fanfare. You went in there to work, and very importantly, you gathered the intel. Who are these gang leaders? Where are they? Figuring out who was doing what, and then setting up the process to apprehend these individuals. And it requires infiltrating those networks and having that data to work from so that you are working in partnership. And as I have talked with elected leaders in Shelby County and Memphis, as we have talked with those in law enforcement, they have been so grateful to have this support and this additional education that comes, because local police are learning from your agents when they are learning how to track these gangs and infiltrate these networks. We know that phase 2 of this operation is going to kick off. The Guard is going to be there to support the Memphis Police Department to help them kind of catch up, because they still have a lot of people on their board. They know who they are, where they are, what they're doing. They want to apprehend them and bring them forward. So talk a little bit about how phase 2 is going to continue to work to support the law enforcement efforts in Memphis.
Well, it's just like what happened here in Washington, D.C. It takes a whole of government interagency approach where we're working with the Attorney General, the DEA, the ATF, the U.S. Marshals, Department of Homeland Security, because each one of those agencies has specialized capabilities. And when we surge together to work off of the ground level intelligence was collected, you see what happened in Washington, D.C. here. And that's the next phase of it, because you are able to utilize the National Guard to set up border perimeter operations. So when you go into an area, you have the secure workspace to get in there and stay in there. The key here, Senator, is sustained criminal investigations and sustained prosecutions that clear Memphis, like we did Washington, permanently, and leave behind a blueprint for what local law enforcement can do with our federal partners to sustain that. We don't want to go backwards, and that's critical, but we're in the next step. Sustaining it will be the last one.
Well, and we certainly appreciate that. I do want to touch on Operation Restore Justice. And Senator Britt mentioned some of this very briefly, and I know that you and A.G. Bondi have done a tremendous amount of work in protecting children. I appreciate that. And we passed my Report Act last year, and President Biden signed it, and this does require social media to report to NCMEC so that we can have these perpetrators followed up with and apprehended. That's a good start. We're still trying to get the Kids Online Safety Act passed. That has been a bipartisan effort. We have looked with disdain at what has happened with Discord and Charlie Kirk's alleged killer. Talk for a moment about what else Congress ought to do in order to give you all the toolbox you need to apprehend these predators and pedophiles.
Well, I think we need to go after the monetary backbone of this infrastructure, like we discussed earlier. I think we also need to make parents across the country aware of how invasive some of these social media sites are and how much criminal enterprise is going on and how easily these kids can be sucked into it. And also, the only way, in my opinion, to do that, is as Senator Klobuchar and I believe Senator Graham had stated, was, we need to work on Section 230. It's been too long since we've addressed it. Nobody's being held accountable. They're making money, and our youth is dying. And
Yes.
that's just unacceptable.
Well, we have that reform bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Welch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And just at the outset, I just want to say what I think all of us believe, and that is that the political violence that is so afflicting our country, it doesn't matter whether it's from the right or the left. I mean, all of us have an obligation to fiercely advocate for our point of view. All of us have an obligation to respect people with whom we disagree. The folks we disagree with are our opponents, but they're not our enemies. And I hope all of us keep that in mind and do the best we can to set that example. I want to congratulate the FBI. I want to congratulate the Utah state and local law enforcement for the very good work that it did in apprehending the violent assailant of Charlie Kirk, and that is a terrible, terrible tragedy. Director Patel, at one point you made an announcement that the suspect was in custody. We got our man. It turned out that was not true. In fact, I think that was about 27 hours before the person now in custody was apprehended. Why did you make that statement?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you letting me address this. What the FBI does is not just locate and find suspects, but we also participate in eliminating subjects. And what we had at the time was a subject in custody in relation to this investigation. So in my commitment to work with the public to help identify subjects and suspects, I put that information out. And then when we interviewed him, I put out the results of that. And could I have been more careful in my verbiage and included an A subject instead of subject? Sure, in the heat of the moment, but I was doing the best I could.
In all candor, I don't quite get that, because if we have our man, that would suggest to the public that everybody can rest and relax and not then continue to provide information to local law enforcement and to you.
Well,
so that was a mistake.
I don't see it as a mistake. I see it as something working with the public to identify that there was a subject
So if
in
you
custody.
if you put out a statement that says we've got our man, and in fact it turns out that you didn't have your man, that's not a mistake?
But that's not what I said.
Well, I'll go on. That's my understanding. A second thing that is really important in the FBI, but it's important in every agency, is that the folks who are doing good work get supported for the work they're doing. And a number of highly successful FBI agents have been let go. And I want to just ask you a little bit about that. You know who Brian Driscoll is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And my understanding is he served at the FBI for over 18 years. You agree?
I believe that's accurate.
Special agent in charge of the Newark office. He was commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team. That's a very prestigious and responsible position, correct?
It is.
Section chief of the Critical Incident Response Group's tactical section. You've got to be pretty good to get that high responsibility. You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
He oversaw 55 SWAT teams, and they're like the elite of the elite, right? They go in to the dangerous situations, right? He got a Medal of Valor for his participation in a raid on ISIS terrorist Abu Sayyaf, who had kidnapped American citizens Kyla Mueller, right? Mueller? Is that
Yeah,
right?
I know.
You're in agreement, right?
I know Kayla Mueller's family. Yes, I know this.
Okay, and he got Kurt Meyer, somebody who had barricaded himself in a bar after he killed 4 people and wounded 2. And Driscoll was part of the team that went in there and took that guy out, right?
I don't have all the details, but I'll take your word for it, Senator.
And he got into trouble when Emil Bove demanded a list of FBI agents who investigated January 6th and was apprehensive that what did happen ultimately would happen, and that is those folks would get fired. I mean, do you agree with me that a boss who stands up for his subordinates when they did the job that was asked of them is a stand-up person and somebody to be admired?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
Pardon me?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
But Driscoll got fired, right?
Again, that matter is under litigation, and the matter you referenced occurred before I was
Okay, but
director.
let's just keep it really narrow here. He's fired, right?
Yes, he was terminated.
And he has to be, there's somebody communicates to him that he's terminated, correct?
That's my job.
That's your job. So you communicated to him that he was fired.
I did.
So, I have a hard time with this because that record suggests to me that this person is like worthy of consideration for the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he got fired.
But there's also a record of other information that was available, and now that this matter is pending litigation, we will get that out in due course. But as you can
the
agree,
so-called, so you've got, quote, other information that you see as a valid basis to fire somebody who, from what I can tell, had an absolutely outstanding record and who crossed the threshold of getting in trouble because he was standing up for agents serving under him who did work that was assigned to them that happened to be related to the January 6th uprising.
again, you're correlating based on your information the reasons for his termination, and I'm telling
No,
you.
that's
there's-
right. Let me ask you another question. You know, when you were here, you were rightly critical, not here, actually, I guess it was on Cash's Corner. You were rightly critical of the way that the previous FBI director used the FBI jet. And you said you wanted to ground Chris Wray's private jet travel that he pays for with taxpayer dollars to hop around the country. Let me ask you this. You know, on the weekend of, according to flight tracker data, on the weekend of March 7th, an FBI plane flew round trip from D.C. to Las Vegas, and you attended a UFC fight with Mel Gibson, and I'll show you that. Is that you, and is that true?
Yeah, you want to know the difference? I live in Las Vegas. I'm allowed to go home. I didn't leave a congressional hearing early on an FBI jet to dodge questions.
All right. Then on April 5th, you attended a hockey game in New York City. You don't live there, right?
No, I don't.
By the way, everyday FBI agents who are assigned in Washington don't get to fly home on a private jet.
Well, this is a great point. Do you know why I have to use a private jet? Because Congress made it mandatory.
Okay. In April 5th, well, we didn't make it mandatory that you go to UFC games with Mel Gibson.
Are you telling me I can't go home?
You know, you got to use some judgment here.
So when I'm at
Jeff,
home,
you
I
would-
can't do what I'm doing when I go home. Everybody else is allowed to go home,
Let
just
me
not
keep
me.
going. No, I'm glad you go home. I
Okay.
love to go home, but I don't go home on a private jet. On April 5th,
They're not mandated to do so.
You attended a hockey game in New York City with Wayne Gretzky, and Flight Tracker says the FBI jet took you to and from New York City, where you don't live, right?
That's correct.
And on April 12th, on the following weekend, you attended a UFC fight, a fight in Miami, also on the FBI jet, right?
That's correct.
So what's the cost to the taxpayer for those 3 flights?
But I pay the commercial equivalent per the regs and the law. And so just so you know, when you are comparing me
I
to
just asked
prior
what
directors.
I asked what the cost was, and you don't know, I take it.
Yeah, and what I've done with the use of the private jet is use Andrews Air Force Base versus
Okay.
Reagan National as what the other directors have done
Bottom line
to
here.
save the taxpayer
Bottom
dollars.
line here, you flew home to Las Vegas. There's nobody else in the FBI who gets paid. They have to pay their own way if they want to go home, right? I mean, right?
Well, that's not accurate. Depending on where you're stationed, the FBI covers the bill to get home.
So are you telling me that FBI agents who are assigned in Washington, but who may live in Charlotte, they get paid by the FBI to go
Sometimes
home?
they do, yes.
All right. Another thing I want to say is this. You know, our local law enforcement has been stiffed. About $500 million in cop grants have been taken out of the budget. Those really help us in Burlington. They help us in Rutland. They really are important. And why in the world would we be cutting those cop grants when we need that local law enforcement, in part to partner with you?
Well, I
Do
think
you
you're
support that?
I think you're speaking to the Department of Justice grants, which I don't adjudicate, but also Vermont, just like every other state, has received a plus-up of FBI personnel.
Well, I'll tell you, that's not what we're seeing. The other thing, my understanding is that there's a requisition or an effort to get another plane for the FBI that would cost about $72 million. Is that right?
That's inaccurate. The FBI, because the jet, as you call it, is not my jet. We use it for operational needs. We use it for FTOCs. We use it for HRT.
But that's the one you fly on,
and
right?
we have multiple fixed-wing assets, and one of them is on a wildly expensive lease that I deemed a waste of money, and I'm looking for a replacement in which the government can procure assets permanently.
Well, I would welcome you submitting to this committee the cost information about the jets that are under consideration. And according to our research, the specifications that are included in this request would result in an expenditure of between $72 million and $80 million.
That's inaccurate, but I'll happily get you the right
I
numbers.
welcome getting the specific information.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
It's on, but I can get closer. Comey became FBI director 2013, and then something like when I became ranking member in the middle of a Congress, or I was ranking member, Comey needed an excuse to come to Des Moines, Iowa, or someplace in Iowa for a family reunion. He wanted to meet with me in Waterloo, Iowa. I think nothing more than an excuse to say he did something official on that trip. Now, I can't accuse him of that because I don't know, but I can't recall that we discussed anything very serious that had to be meet him in Waterloo or Cedar Rapids at the airport before he went to the reunion. And then 2 or 3 years ago, Ray was sitting where you were, and we had 2 Republicans wanted to have second round of questioning, and it would have taken about 10 minutes, and he refused to because he got on this airplane that you're talking about going to the Adirondacks. So I find it interesting that my Democratic colleagues seem to bring up about your use of the Justice Department planes, yet my Democratic colleagues didn't seem too interested about my oversight of Ray's use of the plane. I didn't hear a peep. So my Democratic colleagues need to be consistent.
Can I just add, Mr. Chairman, that when you compare the flight logs and the percentage of work travel to personal travel for the prior 2 FBI directors, over a third of their travel was personal on those same jets that I'm being accused of improperly utilizing. My mark is far less than that. Also, both of those directors use Reagan National Airport, which has landing fees of $5,000 to $10,000 because they didn't want to drive 25 minutes to Andrews. We take off and land in Andrews every single time because it's cheaper, and we do so because it saves the taxpayer dollars. Those are the things we are doing to make sure that we are good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And also, any new acquisition of an airline or a fixed wing asset for the FBI will specifically meet the needs of the demands of the foreign FTOC operations and hostage rescue operations and our critical infrastructure programs.
Senator Moody,
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it.
you're very patient.
I am very patient. You're very patient. I'm new here to the Senate, and I watch what you have to go through as chairman, and we thank you. A lot of what we're talking about today, and you've been questioned about, was uncovered because of our chairman and his service to this committee, and I want to thank him because he's uncovered a lot, especially during the last administration, where many of our federal agencies went far off their mission. And I believe we wouldn't have as much information as we do if it wasn't for our esteemed chairman. So I wanted to publicly thank him. And being the newest member of Judiciary, I am so grateful to be here because sometimes I'm wondering if some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't know what they're talking about, or if they're ill-intentioned and purposefully trying to gaslight not just the American public, but other people in law enforcement and agencies that you're working with. So as a former attorney general, as a former federal prosecutor, as a former judge, as the wife of a law enforcement officer, both federal and state over the course of his career, I would like to clarify a few things and give you the opportunity to highlight some of the things that the FBI is doing. And 2 of the things I heard thrown out there, and by the way, it was when some of my colleagues would breeze in just in time to rail on you and spout out misinformation and narratives that have no grounding in reality to criminal justice, and then breezed right out as soon as they were done. And I think that it does the American public more good when the oversight function of Congress allows for you to comment in a way that makes sense and is grounded in reality. So let's first talk about the reason why we are having to reassign, not just in the FBI, but in other agencies, criminal justice agencies, federal agents to accomplish different things, as has been done historically throughout our country. When we get into office, we have to examine and triage the threats facing this nation, threats facing Americans, and then allocate resources accordingly. I guess you are to be judged negatively because you are trying to reallocate the resources of the FBI to fix what the Democratic administration prior to this under Biden broke. So let's talk about the reassignment of federal agents and why that has been necessary. Would you say that the majority of assignments has been made because we are facing unprecedented levels of violence, both because of the unvetted surge of anywhere from 11 million to 20 million people across our border in the last 4 years, and because of the woke, weak, insane policies that have been pushed into states and cities around this nation by the left?
Absolutely.
And so I hear you being grilled because you have rightfully pushed resources where they needed to go to protect the American public. And I have heard you questioned that you are in some way, and I'm going to use their words, which I don't believe is grounded in reality, that you are going to lean on local and state agents to do the job of the FBI. Might it be recharacterized more accurately in that you are partnering with local and state agencies in these areas, especially where these policies that the Democrats support wholeheartedly, in fact, they frustrate our efforts to try and beef up our laws with good criminal justice policies at every turn, and then come in here and get on you for, by the way, you've been here 7 months, so I know that in the 7 months, you didn't break it, they broke it over the last 4 years. But it isn't more accurate to say that you are using the federal government and its agencies, or its agents and its resources to supplement and amplify law enforcement efforts in these areas, cities and states, where the Democrat policies broke them.
It's been an integral part of my tenure to use local and state partnerships. I say it everywhere I go. We cannot do the work without partnering with state and local authorities in every single state and every single county in this country. And why we pushed out to the field is simple mathematics. While the FBI had a bloated bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., nearly 1/3 of the FBI's workforce lived and worked in the national capital region. 1/3 of the crime doesn't happen here. So I made the simple decision to move them out where the crime was happening in the field, to move out field agents, to move out intel analysts, to move out program managers. And by the way, that's what they all want to do, go out in the field and do the work. And no one's going to be punished for going out in the field and doing the work, and no one's going to be punished for wanting to stay at headquarters and help. But we needed a reallocation of assets, and that's what we did.
And from your experience, both before and now in office, have you found that many of these nonprofits have done work to undermine the stability and security of cities?
Those matters are very much ongoing, and hopefully we can report the results soon.
And I don't mean just those that may have aided and abetted or supported criminal acts. Those absolutely should be investigated and pursued to the fullest extent of the law. And I hope that we follow the money trail, as some of my colleagues have suggested. I also want to get your opinion about the nonprofits that are working to get elected and then push criminal justice policies that have made our cities and states less safe. Specifically, I'm going to push out all of the things that they espouse make the city stronger. No cash bail. Try not to charge crimes. Don't call people offenders or felons or rapists or drug traffickers. I can go on and on and on. But the gist is, don't charge. When you do charge, charge as minimally as you can. Don't put people on parole or probation following incarceration. Diversion should be the rule. I mean, I can go on. And we're seeing these play out in cities across our nation. I am one who believes it is always important to look at how we can do things better in our criminal justice system. But what has happened is some of these groups have hijacked that good intention by so many and used it as a way to subvert the stability of this country. And I firmly believe when that money is traced, you're going to find it's not only going not just to policies, but it's also going to pushing and promoting criminal acts. And I believe that money and support doesn't just come from infrastructure within the US, because I believe undermining our cities and this nation is something our foreign adversaries will get behind, and it will show that they are behind. Is the FBI trying in its reallocation of resources to make up and help in these areas where local law enforcement is trying its best, but it's fighting an uphill battle against mayors and city council and indeed governors that promote and support and pass laws and policies that follow these weak, insane policies?
We go into every community where the crime rates are high, and if you look across the board, the crime rates are coming down across the country because the FBI is going in there and doing good police work, and we're not going to be dictated to by mayors or governors. We have federal law enforcement capabilities and responsibilities to our citizenry, and we're executing those on every single day, including rural communities and tribal lands.
And you are, correct me if I'm wrong, welcomed and supported and enthusiastically praised by the cops that are there because they want those communities safer.
Well, I think the police speak for themselves, and we'll let them do that at their own leisure.
And one of the other gaslightings that I heard was that and we're trying to help them because they're having vacancy rates and they can't retain police, and you're causing that. Is it in fact that police across this country, because they've been defunded, they're not supported, they have groups that are continuously combating when they're trying to make the communities safer? I know this because when I was the Attorney General, they all wanted to come to Florida, and I welcomed them with open arms. In fact, we are increasing our ranks in Florida, sometimes to the detriment of other cities and states because they can't keep them. They tried to make it sound like it was your fault that we had vacancies in these police ranks around the nation, when in fact, aren't you trying to help bolster their ranks and help them because they have mayors and prosecutors and city councils and governors that won't help them?
That's exactly what we did. We did it in D.C., we're doing it in Memphis, we're going to Chicago, Miami, St. Louis, so many other cities across the country.
And I'm just grateful that you are doing this, and I commend you for all the numbers that I'm seeing going after the violent crime, helping make sure we are getting the criminals that came here unvetted from other nations out of this country, that you are allocating resources to those efforts. It is all important to make this a stronger, safer nation, and we appreciate you being here today and making sure we're talking truth and not misinformation to the American people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Before Senator Schiff, I want a UC to introduce into the record a declassified Clinton Annex. The Clinton Annex is a declassified appendix to the Justice Department Inspector General report about the Clinton email investigation. The annex shows that the FBI had evidence necessary to conduct, quote, thorough and complete investigation, end of quote. But the Comey FBI failed to review the evidence at the time. After nearly a decade in the shadows, this information has now come to light thanks to Dr. Patel, or Director Patel. Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, during your confirmation hearing, you made several important commitments For instance, you told Senator Coons, there will be no politicization at the FBI. There'll be no retributive actions taken by any FBI should I be confirmed as FBI director. So let me ask you very specifically, did you ever take any action to terminate or discipline an FBI agent or employee in whole or in part as retribution for being part of an investigation of Donald Trump or January 6th?
No.
You also committed, you assured Senator Blumenthal, all FBI employees will be protected against political retribution. So you're testifying today that you played no role in the firing of even a single FBI agent for political retribution.
None for political retribution.
And if any FBI agent said you did, they would be lying. Is that your testimony?
I'm only speaking to my actions. Everybody is allowed to make their allegations.
Oh,
I
no,
have
these are
not-
allegations against you.
And
So,
I'm-
Mr. Patel, if FBI, senior FBI agents or employees said that you were firing them for political retribution reasons because of the cases they were assigned, you're saying they would be lying. Is that your
Anyone that was
testimony?
terminated at the FBI was done so for failing to meet the standards, uphold their constitutional oath, and effectuate the mission.
Well, by meet the standards, are you talking about meet the standards of protecting the president under any circumstance?
No.
You also guaranteed Senator Blumenthal that every FBI employee will be held to the same, absolute same standard. No one will be terminated for case assignments. Are you testifying today that you never terminated anyone at the FBI in whole or in part because of a prior case assignment?
No one at the FBI is terminated for case assignments alone.
Well, I'm asking about you, Mr. Patel. Did you, in whole or in part, terminate anyone at the FBI because they worked on the Trump investigation or because they worked on January 6th?
No one at the FBI has been terminated for case assignments alone.
Okay, you're saying alone. Does that mean they were terminated in part because they were assigned to a January 6th case or assigned to the Mar-a-Lago case? You're being very precise here, Mr. Patel. You're saying alone. That means they were fired in part because they were assigned those cases. Is that your testimony?
Absolutely not. But if you want to keep
Okay,
putting words
well,
in my mouth,
then
go
let me
ahead.
ask you, let's strip away the word alone. Did you terminate or participate in any discipline of any FBI employee in whole or in part because of their work on an investigation of Donald Trump or January 6th? Yes or no?
Any terminations at the FBI by employees.
No, I'm
since
asking you a very specific
And I'm
question.
going to answer the question, but you don't like the answer because it's the
No,
truth
I
and it guts
want
your
an answer to my
narrative.
question. I don't want an answer to someone else's question. So let me just be precise, and I ask for a yes or no answer. Did you ever terminate or discipline an FBI employee in whole or in part because they had been assigned or worked on an investigation of Donald Trump or January 6th? Yes or
FBI
no?
employees are only terminated
Yes
if
or
they
no,
fail
Mr.
to
Patel?
uphold their oaths of
Yes or
office
no?
and duty.
You're not
at the
answering my
FBI
question.
I
You're
don't
not
have to
answering my
answer your
question.
question yes or no because you're setting up a trap so you can have a
Oh,
media
no, I'm
narrative.
not setting up a trap.
And I'm not giving it to you.
Unless it's true that you fired people.
People
in
have
whole
been
or in part
terminated at
because
the
they-
FBI who failed to uphold
they were
the
assigned
standards
to.
that the FBI requires them
Did you
to
tell?
uphold.
Did you tell anyone at the FBI that all FBI employees who they identified who had worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs? Did you tell that to someone at the FBI?
Say that I would remove people for case assignments?
That you would, that people that were identified as having worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs? Did you tell that to someone at the FBI?
People are not removed
But
for
just
case
answer my question.
assignments.
Just answer my question. Did you tell that to
People
someone?
are not removed for case
No,
assignments.
you're not answering my question.
And I would
Mr.
never
Patel,
tell anyone.
Did you tell someone at the FBI that FBI employees identified as having worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs? Yes or no? Did you tell someone that?
I would never tell anyone at the FBI that they're being removed for basically their case assignments.
Okay, so anyone who had said that would be lying. Is that your testimony?
Anyone can say whatever they want.
No, I know, but you're saying they were a liar.
I'm telling you what I said.
Because this is in the complaint against you, Mr. Patel. So you're saying Mr. Driscoll and others are liars?
I'm not going to address the complaint and the ongoing
Okay, well then let me ask
litigation.
you, have you ever told anyone at the FBI that the FBI tried to put the president in jail and he hasn't forgotten it, and that your job depended on the removal of agents who worked on cases against the president?
No.
Did you ever tell anyone that?
No.
Okay. Did you ever tell anyone that you knew these summary firings you were undertaking were illegal, likely illegal, and that you would be sued and later deposed? Did you ever tell anyone that?
No firings at the FBI or terminations were done for anything other than justified
Did you ever
cause.
tell anyone that, Mr.
No,
Patel? Why don't you
no
answer my question?
terminations at the FBI were ever done in my tenure for anything other than failing
Did you
to
ever tell
uphold
anyone
their
that,
oath of
Mr.
the
Patel? You willing to
office
answer
or
the
their-
question?
The FBI.
I guess
I
you're not
have
willing to
answered
answer the
it.
question. So let me move on. Let me
Repeatedly.
move on to the Epstein files. You said you're the most transparent FBI director in history, so I'm going to put you to the test. In 2024, you were asked by Glenn Beck about Epstein's Black Book. And you said, he asked, who has Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book? And you said, Black Book, FBI. And he said, but who? That is, I mean theirs. And you said, oh, that's under the direct control of the director of the FBI. That's what you said. Was that true, Mr. Patel?
I'll rely on you quoting it accurately. I did that a
Was
couple
it
years
true
ago.
what you represented to Mr. Beck and the president's supporters out there, or were you lying?
No,
Was it true that the Black Book, Epstein's Black Book, was in the possession of the FBI director?
The Black Book was in the possession of the FBI.
Okay, so now that you're the FBI director, you have possession of the Black Book, right?
That index has been released.
So you have Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book?
What is known as Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book has been released
Okay,
by us.
And you released it. And let me follow up on Senator Kennedy's question, because he asked you, and I'll be very precise here. You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself? And you said, himself, there's no credible information, none. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And Kennedy, the information we have, again, is limited. And Senator Kennedy said, the answer is no one. And you said, for the information we have. So is it your testimony today that in all the Epstein files, that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked no one to anyone but himself? Is that your testimony, Mr.
I never
Patel?
said Jeffrey Epstein didn't traffic anyone else.
Did he traffic any young woman to someone other than himself? That was Mr. Kennedy's question,
And I
Senator Kennedy's
said
question.
the information that 3 administrations have had access to
I'm
have
asking-
made determinations that there are no investigative leads that were credible to prosecute and investigate any others. I'm
Well,
specifically
I'm asking
stating
you whether
we
it's
were
your
working on.
testimony today.
You just read
that
it, and I said it
I'm-
10 minutes ago, so let the record reflect my testimony.
I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding, because there are victims like Virginia Guifer who have testified otherwise, who have said otherwise, and you're telling the American people today that the Epstein list is a single name and it's Jeffrey Epstein. That's what we're to believe?
That's not what I'm saying. That's what you're saying, and
Well,
you can say whatever you
Let me
want.
ask you this. When Todd Blanche went to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, she said, but did I think these guys were coming for that? I really don't. If you met Epstein, there's no way that this cast of characters, of which it's extraordinary, and some are in your cabinet, who you value as your co-workers, and you know would be with him if he was a creep or because they wanted sexual favors. A man wants sexual favors, he will find that. They didn't have to come to Epstein for that. And the next question Todd Blanche, the president's former criminal defense lawyer, asked is not who in the cabinet, who are you referring to? His question is, so when's the last time you think you were with Mr. Epstein when he got a massage? So let me ask you, who are those cabinet members that Ghislaine Maxwell was referring to that were part of this cast of characters associated with Mr. Epstein? Who are they?
The Deputy Attorney General took the aggressive step that no one else did and interviewed Miss Maxwell for
I'm
2
asking you,
days,
who are
and we released
who are
the
the cabinet
entirety
members?
of that
Who are the cabinet
transcript.
members?
I do not have that transcript in front of me. You're picking it piecemeal. The American public can read the entirety of that.
One last question, because you clearly won't tell us the cabinet members associated with Mr. Epstein. Let me ask you one last question. And that is, right after she gives this testimony in front of an FBI agent, among others, she's transferred to a minimum security prison not suitable for a sex offender like herself. Who made that decision and why?
The Bureau of Prisons.
The Bureau of Decisions made it in
Prisons.
The Bureau of Prisons decided on their own, without any consultation with Blanche or anyone else, that they were going to suddenly, after this interview, completely unrelated to this interview, completely unrelated to anything she said, move her to a prison not suitable for a sex offender. You want the American people to believe that? Do you think they're stupid?
No, I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of
you're not in
inmates.
the weeds?
What I am
The
doing is
most-
protecting
the
this country,
most- the
providing
most
historic
significant
reform,
witness-
and
the most
combating the
significant witness,
weaponization of
the
intelligence by the
EpsteinFiles
likes of you.
cover-up
And we have
gets
countlessly proven you to
from
be a
your
liar in
administration,
Russiagate, in
and you
January
call that
6th.
being
You are
in
the
the
biggest
weeds?
fraud to ever sit in the
This
United States
stinks to
Senate.
high
You are a
heaven.
disgrace to this
This stinks to high
institution
heaven.
and an utter coward.
And I'm not surprised.
I'm not
I'm
surprised
not
that you continue to lie
surprised
from
that
your
that
perch and put on a show
two of you
so you can go
have
raise
you-
money
well,
for your
and for good
charade.
reason.
You are a political buffoon at best.
Well, you can take an internet troll.
Take
and
it
make-
to
you
the
can take
bank
an
that the
internet-
FBI is
you
protecting
can
this
make an
country
internet troll.
and the state and
The FBI
citizens of the
director
California.
will
We
always
are
be
bringing
nothing more
historic
than an
reform.
internet
Point of
troll.
order.
But all you care about is a child sex predator that was prosecuted by a prior administration, and the Obama Justice Department and the Biden Justice Department did squat. And what did President Trump do? Bring new charges courageously. And what have we done?
Chairman,
You said
take
I'm the
control
most
of this
transparent
situation.
FBI director in history.
Take control of this
33,000 pages of information to you. I challenge you to say anything credibly to the truth. Go ahead and run to the cameras where you want to go now.
Both of you be quiet. Before I go to Senator Tillis, without objection, want to introduce into the record the Durham Annex. The Durham Annex is a declassified appendix to John Durham's report about Crossfire Hurricane. The Durham Annex contains information exposing a reported Clinton campaign plan to falsely tie President Trump to Russia. For years, I've fought to assemble and publicize all the facts heretofore unknown surrounding Durham's investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, and related matters. The Durham Annex was declassified large part because of Director Patel. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Patel, thank you for being here. I've actually admired the way you've tried to keep your composure over the course of this. Kind of reminds me of an old Far Side comic that said the floggings will continue until morale improves. The last one I just coach you on, don't take the bait, because they're going to use that discussion between you and Senator Schiff, as you've suggested before, to raise money. Just sit down in the quiet confidence that you're doing a good job. Real quick, in less than 30 seconds, give me your resume again on why you're qualified for this position.
Thank you, Senator. I served as a public defender and national security prosecutor. I tried over 60 criminal trials to verdict in state and federal court. I served as the lead investigator in the House Intelligence Committee and the counterterrorism expert there, unfolding the Russiagate investigation. I served as the head of counterterrorism for a presidential White House. I served as the deputy director of national intelligence at the Office of Director of National Intelligence, overseeing our 17 intelligence agencies. I served as a chief of staff to the Department of Defense and the Secretary of Defense, overseeing a $2 trillion financial equity flow, and also defending the homeland and providing for our no-fail mission.
We could drill down in details, because I've studied that record, and I think you should be very proud of it. I just did that for the benefit of the liberal media that just keep referring to you as a podcaster, I think, and I appreciate you giving me that resume. It's a good body of work. It's why I supported your nomination so strongly when you were before this committee. Really quickly, too, on the events of last week and the sad death and assassination of Mr. Kirk, I seem to recall that Mr. Zinn, I think, was the first person of interest. He was reported to be saying, I shot him, now shoot me, or something to that effect. Would that have more or less, and your job is to calm the tensions, right? There were people running all over the building, people are afraid over there. Could it be that because you were in possession of some of that information that maybe you did just characterize as getting our man, that maybe that's what led up to it, if those facts are correct?
What led me to that is to the eliminate subjects, but also we were in a period with inside of 24 hours where we didn't know who the shooter was.
Well, that's why I asked, because people are forgetting that this man was reported to have been saying, I shot him, now shoot me. They're also forgetting that he brought in an attorney and said that he'd fabricated the claim to draw attention away from the actual shooter. And he went on to get multiple charges for possessing child pornography and sexual abuse material on his phone. So I'm just saying that it just seems to me that in the moment, maybe you should have used different words, but I can't imagine that the amount of time that we've spent on that subject in the hearing today. But I think it's because they're really worried that they're another punchline to an old joke. Your work, it's working in practice, but it's not working in their theory. They haven't heard you, so it's working in practice, but not in theory. They haven't heard you say multiple times that you've plussed up FBI resources in every state. They haven't heard you when you've talked about year-over-year comparisons for results. I don't care how many people you have at HQ, as long as you keep producing those results and they're good. They need to be sustained. Now, I am a little bit concerned about the deployment of National Guard troops to dangerous cities, but you keep on mentioning something I'm going to go back to in terms of joint task forces. You also did a great job of explaining why you think you should save money and go out and fly out of an airport versus an easy trip across the Potomac to National. I love all of those responses. I'm not going to repeat them here. But I'm worried that if we move in too quickly, let's say to Memphis, I should back up and say I was Speaker of the House in North Carolina. And I would consider it a personal failure on the part of state leadership if they have to call in federal resources to do their job beyond what they do every day. And that's promoting joint task forces. I've seen ATF, DEA, FBI. I've been in the briefing rooms at 3 o'clock in the morning about to go and do a 55 no-knock warrants on bad people. You all do that every day, and thank God that you are. It looks like we should plus it up in a few cities. I'd rather use the money to deploy National Guard to just continue to leverage what you're already doing well. And I compliment you because I've got to believe it's a lot of these joint task forces that have increased the apprehension and charging rates. So thank you for that. But do you agree that at the end of the day, if we're going to have a sustained impact on crime, whether it's Memphis or any other city, that we've really got to enable, empower, and continue to support the men and women on the ground there every single day?
100%.
Thank you. I think that your cost-benefit mind needs to go into, if I'm about to deploy this many National Guardsmen to a city, what does that cost? And what would that look like if we were plowing that cost of deployment into ongoing, I believe, joint task force, which are working very well. They're working well in North Carolina. So I'd like you to look at it. Now I'm going to move on. The Safer Communities Act, can I get your commitment to get an update? Maybe we could even take a trip out to West Virginia to see how we're doing an extraordinary job of NICS background checks. People are getting them in record time, but we are taking a few guns away from people that probably shouldn't be able to buy it that day. Would you agree with that characterization?
I would love to have you out, and anyone else in this day is to West Virginia to see that
I'd like
work.
to bring some of my colleagues to see it's working. We had people on my side of the aisle saying it was going to be awful, it was going to result in mass confiscation of guns. Not true. They were wrong. This bill's making a difference. I also want to talk about the behavioral health and other components in granting. I know in North Carolina things are going well. I want to make sure that that flow is going out there because the tragic events in North Carolina and Charlotte, the stabbing, I spoke with one of the family members yesterday, I think that we have to recognize that we have magistrates that have a revolving door policy, no doubt about that. And they should be held accountable if they're releasing dangerous people. But I also think that some of the problem is that we simply don't have a place to send people, particularly with respect to behavioral health. We have got to continue to, every law enforcement officer I've ever spoken with says, look, I've got law enforcement officers seconded to an emergency room because I've got somebody with no place to send them. I don't have a bed upstairs I can send them to. I don't have a behavioral health facility. We've got to provide more ways to detain people that are a risk to themselves and a risk for the community. And I really do believe the Safer Communities Act is a good framework for doing that. That's only a comment. Section 702 is going to come up in April of next year for renewal. Do you believe it should be eliminated and not reauthorized?
No, sir. It needs to be
Can I also
reauthorized.
get your commitment maybe to come back over and review some of the controls that are in place and other things? So hopefully we won't have the drama leading up to April. We can actually come here and get consensus on why you've got the checks and balances in place and why we should do it. Just remove any chance that we're going to run into that cliff narrative next year. Can I get your commitment on doing that?
You have
Mr.
it, sir.
Patel? Thank you. I want to talk very briefly on, and the chairman's given me a gavel, but I promise not to go over more than 2 minutes. But that's why I chose to be last, so I could have this discussion and actually get to some facts versus agendas and clickbait that we'll almost certainly see going forward. Tell me a little bit about the rationale behind the change in stance in recruiting. I also understand there may be a reduction in the academy timeline. Just give me some thinking about where you are on recruiting, retention, training, et cetera.
Simple. So recruitment is through the roof. We've doubled up month over month our applicants to be 1811s, our federal agents, intel analysts. So the recruitment is going wonderful. What we have to do is figure out a way to get creative because the BFTC timeline is an 18 to 20 week program. And what we've done to address the openings we have for 1811 BRIC agents is we opened it up to the interagency and said, hey, do you at Secret Service or DEA or ATF want to come over? You guys went through FLETC. You guys were cops or military officers. You're law enforcement. So we created a shortened bridge program of 6 weeks at Quantico that if you want to come over and be an FBI agent, you can do so. There's transfers all the time. We just made it easier. And we're also recruiting police officers who might not have a college degree. But in my opinion, that does not disqualify them from serving our community. So we're welcoming them. It's a rigorous application process. It's just one item. But we are changing the timelines based on the needs of the country, but not jeopardizing quality.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I heard someone almost a throwaway line that you were hiring people without a college degree. Most of them have had basic law enforcement training, all the kinds of certifications. You're talking to somebody who didn't achieve my 4-year degree until I was 37. I'd like to think that I brought some things to the table, and I think that those people, the mere comment, I think is inappropriate for somebody considering this to think that they're a lesser person because they don't have a piece of paper. I wanted to get back to the last thing that I will talk about. I'll follow up with some questions for the record. Thank you, incidentally, for consistently being responsive to any inquiries I've made to you. But on the Kirk shooting, I do believe that that Senator Schmitt's numbers are right. There seems to be a disproportionate number of voices on the left that are celebrating the assassination of a CEO or celebrating the assassination of someone in Mr. Kirk's case that I disagreed with probably about half of his positions. But I felt like it was a good voice in engaging young people, and that's a start, as long as we can do it civilly. And then I also just went back online because I've hammered on this committee multiple times. I just went online and I found in Pinterest that even today you could order a T-shirt that says ACAB 13.12, which translates to all cops are bastards. Or if you don't like that shirt, you can go get an F the Cops shirt at the same website, on a location on Pinterest. There is clearly a problem with some of the voices of the left, and I'm not necessarily saying any members of Congress, that need to tamp it down. Having said that, within 24 hours of Mr. Kirk's shooting, we had the guy that does the podcast for the War Room and another guy who's denied the Sandy Hook shootings say we're at war. Now, how on earth, and I do believe it's a smaller number, but it's a number that has an influence. How on earth are we de-escalating the situation with the tensions as high as they were last week with going out and saying we're at war? I'm not asking you to respond to this question. I'm just saying that there are people out here on our side of the aisle that still need to look in the mirror. Even if you agree that it's a lower number, bad is bad no matter how many numbers they are. And that kind of rhetoric and that kind of mobilization makes your job more difficult and puts us in a position where we're not being as productive as you want the FBI and state and local law enforcement to be. I'm finished. I just want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you for your concise answers. And I am thoroughly impressed with the fact that you have sat in that chair for over 4 hours without a break. So with that, we're, on behalf of the chair, want to thank you for being here today. And also, I assume, are we leaving the record open for any period of time for 1 week? The record will be open, left open for 1 week so that you may have questions for the record. Mr. Patel, thank you for being here
Thank
today.
you, Mr. Chairman.
Meeting's adjourned.
Under your leadership, the FBI has apprehended several most wanted fugitives and secured the extradition of senior leaders of the Central American gangs like MS-13. Now, it's well understood that your predecessor left you an FBI infected with politics. I'm going to provide examples of that today, including making public new whistleblower records. At your nomination hearing, I made public records that whistleblowers provide me about Arctic Frost. Arctic Frost was the FBI case opened and approved by antitrust Trump FBI agent Thibault. Arctic Frost then became Jack Smith's elector case against then citizen Trump and now President Trump. These new records show that Arctic Frost was much broader than just an electoral matter. The case was expanded to Republican organizations. Some examples of the group that Ray FBI sought to place under political investigation included the Republican National Committee, Republican Attorney General's Association, and various Trump political groups. In total, 92 Republican targets, including Republican groups and Republican-linked individuals, were placed under investigative scope of Arctic Frost. On that political list was one of Charlie Kirk's groups, Turning Point USA. In other words, Arctic Frost wasn't just a case to politically investigate Trump. It was the vehicle by which partisan FBI agents and Department of Justice prosecutors could achieve their partisan ends and improperly investigate the entire Republican political apparatus. So today, Senator Johnson and I are making these records public for the entire country to see, and I hope a lot of people are interested in seeing what government can do when various agencies have a political agenda. My investigative work has also exposed the political way in which Peter Navarro was investigated and prosecuted. When FBI agent Tebow found out that Biden's DOJ would prosecute Navarro, he said, "Wow, great." That's a quote, unquote. Through whistleblowers, I've obtained a audio recording of Special Agent Giagardina and Special Agent Sebastian Gardner's delivery of a subpoena to Navarro. I'm making that audio public today. In a court document filed by the Department of Justice, Navarro's interaction with the FBI was unfairly described as, quote unquote, the word combative. That intervention with Navarro was just as the justification to later aggressively arrest him. Then we get to the Clinton Annex and the Durham Annex. The Clinton Annex showed that the Comey FBI had evidence necessary to complete the Clinton investigation, the one about her mishandling of emails and classified information, but the FBI never did its job because it never reviewed the evidence at that time. The Durbin Annex showed that the Clinton campaign had a plan to falsely tie Trump to Russia, yet the Comey FBI failed to investigate that information. Instead, the Comey FBI used the discredited Clinton campaign-funded Steele dossier to advance crossfire hurricane against Trump. Director Patel, thanks in a large part to you, both annexes were finally declassified. That may be history, but it's history to make sure we don't repeat the history of the past. And the people ought to be concerned when the weaponization of government is used in this way, whether it's done by Republicans or Democrats. Last Congress, I made public an FBI document called 1023 form that alleged a bribery scheme with the Biden family. To date, the FBI has never answered Congress whether they investigated the text messages, the audio files, and the financial records referenced in that 1023. Whistleblowers have provided my office with 2 additional FBI 1023 documents. These documents memorialize statements from FBI sources. These 2 new 1023 documents are from separate FBI confidential human sources during different years. So in total, we now have 3 different FBI confidential human sources providing information about the Biden family and potential criminal conduct. Today, Senator Johnson and I are releasing these records. Let me say this for the partisan media, the people that are supposed to be policemen of our Republican form of government. We aren't saying the allegations are true. We want to know what the FBI did to fully investigate their veracity or lack thereof and what they concluded. Let's put this matter to rest one way or the other. Starting with my chairmanship, I've given one example after another of disgraceful partisan weaponization by federal law enforcement. Since the Trump administration took power, many FBI agents have been removed. The removal included agents and prosecutors who became partisan weapons that lost their way, and I've made records public to prove it. And many of my whistleblowers were aggressively retaliated against by some FBI agents who were subsequently fired. One FBI whistleblower publicly said of these terminations, quote, ensuring that they no longer work at the FBI isn't retribution, it's responsible leadership, end of quote. Which brings me to my final and favorite topic, whistleblowers. In August, 10 of my FBI whistleblowers secured compensation agreement because of your leadership, Director Patel. It included a mix of reinstatement to the FBI, reinstatement of security clearances, and monetary compensation. At the beginning of this month, another of my FBI whistleblowers got their job back. All told, across government agencies, almost 20 whistleblowers have received fixes to their retaliation. Today, you'll get a lot of grief from some members of this committee, but in the short amount of time you've been director, you've corrected whistleblower retaliation, increased transparency more than any other FBI director I've seen, whether that FBI director was appointed by Republicans or Democrats. And I've been around here more than anybody else on this committee. I yield to Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chairman Grassley, for holding this oversight hearing during a critical period in the history of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. During my 4 years as chair, I held 4 hearings with then FBI Director Wray. As a reminder to Republicans who claim the Biden administration weaponized the FBI, President Biden retained Director Wray, a lifelong Republican who was President Trump's nominee for the office. After his second election, in an unprecedented move, President Trump forced out Director Wray and nominated Kash Patel, arguably the most partisan FBI director ever. Director Patel came to the FBI with a political mission, and he spelled it out in writing in detail. He wrote, "Government gangsters, quote, the rot at the core of the FBI is not just scandalous, it's an existential threat to our Republican form of government," end quote. And with the power of his office and the blessings of the president, he attacked the FBI with a vengeance. Mr. Patel had falsely claimed the FBI, quote, was planning January 6th for a year, end quote. He even went so far as to produce a song by the January 6 rioters who violently assaulted police officers in the Capitol. He compiled an enemies list of public servants he called government gangsters, like former FBI Director Mueller, whom Patel called, quote, an utter swamp creature. Former Trump officials who served with Mr. Patel warned us he would weaponize the FBI to protect the president's allies and target his critics. And indeed, Director Patel has already inflicted untold damage on the FBI, putting our national security and public safety at risk. Since January 20th, the Trump administration has engaged in an unprecedented purge of FBI officials. As we heard from highly credible whistleblowers, Mr. Patel was involved in directing this purge even before he was confirmed, despite his sworn testimony to this committee. It began with terminations and forced retirements of all 6 nonpartisan career officials who run all 6 branches of the FBI, assistant directors. Since then, at least 18 of the 53 special agents in charge of FBI field offices have been removed, along with many other senior officials. Individual agents have been targeted for termination simply due to the work that they were assigned, such as January 6th investigation. In fact, according to former acting FBI Director Brian Driscoll, in a lawsuit filed last week, Director Patel made this very plain, telling Driscoll personally, quote, that his own job depended on the removal of agents who worked on the cases against the president, end quote. And even though he knew, quote, the nature of summary findings were likely illegal. At the same time, Director Patel has installed MAGA loyalists as political appointees in key career positions, including conspiracy theorist Dan Bongino as FBI Deputy Director, the first time in the history of the FBI that this position has not been held by a career FBI agent. Director Patel has also reportedly initiated loyalty test, requiring dozens of officials to sit for polygraph exams and answer inappropriate questions about whether they've made negative comments about him personally. Of course, as is often the case in the Trump administration, the rules apply to thee, but not to me. As we understand it from highly credible sources, key members of Director Patel's senior executive team and others on the 7th floor had disqualifying alerts on their initial polygraph exams. Well, how did they survive? They survived because of a personal waiver by either the director or the attorney general to remain employed by the Bureau. Understand the context here. Political operatives in key positions, given the routine FBI polygraph exam, failed and had to receive waivers to continue their positions. They were lucky to keep their political appointments. They were. But the 5,000 career civil servants the director has so far forced out of the Bureau's ranks were not offered that same courtesy. 5,000. This mass exodus has created a disastrous brain drain, particularly in the fields of cybersecurity, counterterrorism, and counterintelligence. For example, my office has received information indicating that cuts to the Bureau's cyber division will cut personnel by half, despite the ever-increasing threats posed by adverse foreign actors. The brain drain is exacerbated by Director Patel's misuse of remaining FBI personnel and resources to focus on other priorities of this administration. According to reports, the 25 largest FBI field offices have been ordered to divert 45% of their agents from their primary missions to work on the mass deportation of immigrants. Just as concerning is Director Patel's plan to hire fewer qualified agents by removing the college degree requirement and reducing new agent training at Quantico from 18 weeks to just 8. So we have a brain drain and a significant watering down of training. Quite a record, Mr. Patel. As recently fired special agents and others have warned, fast-tracking inexperienced and improperly trained people into critical national security jeopardizes the Bureau's ability to effectively protect America. Director Patel himself had no training or life experience for this position. The result of that incompetence is staggering. For example, after Attorney General Bondi publicly stated in February that the Epstein client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now to review, that's what she said on Fox, Director Patel diverted more than 1,000 FBI personnel from their critical missions to work on 24-hour shifts reviewing over 100,000 pages of Epstein-related records. These personnel were instructed to flag any records in which President Trump was named. But that review ended in an unsigned memorandum from DOJ and FBI stating simply, there is no incriminating client list, close quote. Director Patel still has not responded to my letter from 2 months ago asking about his role in this cover-up. On the day of the horrific shooting of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University, Director Patel again sparked mass confusion by incorrectly claiming on social media that the shooter was in custody, which he then had to walk back with another social media post. Mr. Patel was so anxious to take credit for finding Mr. Kirk's assassin that he violated one of the basics of effective law enforcement. At critical stages of an investigation, shut up and let the professionals do their job. Notably, Director Patel recently forced out Special Agent in charge of Salt Lake City, Mayim Saeed, a counterterrorism expert with 20 years experience, who would have led this high-profile investigation. The men and women who serve at the FBI and the American people deserve a director who has the ability and the character to restore the Bureau to its place as the preeminent law enforcement agency. I want to close on a personal note. I came of age in the 1960s. We experienced a number of horrific assassinations, including President John Kennedy, Senator Robert Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King. We are going through a similar period of division and political violence. All of us in public life, on both sides of the aisle, have a responsibility to bring down the temperature and to work to unite the American people. Let's be clear. Republicans are not Nazis, and Democrats are not evil, as Mr. Patel has claimed. Democrats are not responsible for the murder of Charlie Kirk, and Republicans were not responsible for the murder of Melissa Hordman. Our political opponents are not our enemies. We are all Americans, and we should be working together to keep the American people safe and protect their constitutional rights. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would you please stand so I could swear? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Please be seated, and you can give your statement now.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the committee. It's an honor to be here with you today as the 9th Director of the FBI. I want to provide by providing a briefing into the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk. It's important that this FBI is transparent as possible without jeopardizing investigations. Charlie Kirk was shot at 12:23 p.m. on September 10th. I think this timeline is critically important. Less than a day later, the FBI, at my direction, released the first set of images of the suspect that we captured based on our analysis on the ground. Later that evening, while conducting extensive interviews and cell phone analysis, and also flying out evidence response teams and hostage rescue teams and evidence tacticians who were collecting evidence in live time and flying them back to Washington, D.C. in our laboratories for immediate analyses, we were able to extract video from the campus feed, and at my direction at 8 p.m., in partnership and promise to working with the public to bring this fugitive to justice, we released a newly, never before seen video of the suspect. We also released new enhanced photos of the suspect. A few hours later, that suspect was in custody, pursuant to the interrogation of the suspect's own father, who stated, "When I saw that video that you released, I recognized it was my son, and I confronted him, and he was handed over to lawful law enforcement authorities." That is the FBI working with the public, as I promised, being transparent and providing critical information along the way in the manhunt for the suspect and suspects involved in Charlie's assassination. We received over 11,000 tips in the first 24 hours alone. We received 16,000 submissions to our digital media enterprise and tip lines. That is a large number of material to go through. I want to thank President Trump and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, for their unwavering support and commitment of resources to this and all investigations. I also want to especially thank our colleagues in Utah, the Governor's Office, DPS, and the sheriffs out there. State and local law enforcement partnership has been a cornerstone since I took over at the FBI, and it was no different here. And our teams in Salt Lake City, our SACs out there across the country, our lab technicians in Quantico who raced to complete the evidence analysis so the public could have the answers they need. These people worked through the night without sleep for days on end. They are to be commended. They are not to be attacked. And many, many, many more people I don't have time to thank here today. But I do want to thank the American people especially. The mission of the FBI is for them and with them and by, with, and through them. And it's that mission and that ethos that I brought to this investigation and so many others, and that's why that suspect is in custody. We cannot do our job without the American public and credible reporting in the media, and that's why Tyler Robinson is in custody today, about to face charges. The last time I appeared before this committee was in January for my confirmation hearing. I told you then that if I were confirmed, I would provide and do everything I can to provide a safe and secure America. I promise to provide the courageous men and women of the FBI the tools and resources they need to crush violent crime and defend the homeland. I pledge myself to commit to full transparency, oversight, and accountability so we could restore the public's trust in the FBI. And that's exactly what I've done. Under this administration, the FBI has arrested more than 23,000 violent criminals. That's more than twice for the same time period from last year alone. 23,000, more than twice from the same time period last year. We've taken over 6,000 illegal firearms off the streets. That number is an exponential increase. We've identified and located more than 4,700 child victims. More than 4,700 child victims have been found by this FBI. That is a 35% increase from the same time period last year. 1,500 child predators have been arrested. That's a 5% increase from the same time last year. 300 human traffickers have been arrested. That's a 10% increase from the same time last year. Over 350 members of Tren de Aragua, foreign terrorist organization, have been arrested, and we have 42 ongoing cases. That is a 250% increase from the same time last year. Those are just some of the things the FBI is doing differently and better because we are leading the mission to crush violent crime and defend the homeland. We have also arrested captured four top 10 fugitives from the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. To put that in perspective, that's the same amount I've captured in 7 months than my predecessor did during the entirety of the Biden administration. Those are real results, and the credit is to the men and women at the FBI. We've been able to achieve these results because the FBI recognizes violent crime doesn't just happen in Washington, D.C. That's why one of my first decisions as a director was to get the people, the Bureau's professional staff, out to the field. And we've done that with great speed. And every single one of your districts and states has received a plus-up of FBI personnel, agents, and special operators to the tune of almost 1,000. We did that because crime had unexpectedly and unacceptably exploded across the country. In fact, one of the stats that the American people should thank the FBI the most for is we are on track to have the lowest murder rate in modern American history. The lowest murder rate by double-digit percentages. A major factor in the drop of this violent crime is the FBI's flagship Operation Summer Heat. We use this initiative at the direction of the President and the Attorney General, surging resources to our major and mid-major cities across America, conducting intelligence-based operations to target the worst of the worst, to target the gangs, to target the transnational organizations, to target the TCOs, and to target the drug trafficking cartels. And we have taken them out city by city. There's a lot of work left to be done, but we're off to a great start. Just ask the citizens of Seattle, Miami, Memphis, Charlotte, Chicago, and so many more places. Specifically in New Orleans and Nashville alone, there has been an increase in the number of violent crime arrests by an average of 250% for each of those cities. And there has been a drastic reduction in crime across the board in mid-major cities across this country, thanks to the men and women of the FBI. How are we doing that? We are attacking the drug epidemic. We've seized nearly 1,000 kilograms of meth and cocaine off the streets of America. We've taken over 1,600 kilograms of fentanyl off the streets. Maybe one of the greatest achievements we have this year, 1,600 kilograms of fentanyl. That's a 25% increase from the same time last year. To put things in perspective, that's enough fentanyl to kill a third of the American populace, 115 million Americans. We're also going after the companies that manufacture these precursors overseas in places like mainland China and their cutting agents. In fact, this month in Cincinnati, we announced groundbreaking charges aimed at the individuals and businesses responsible for flooding these opioids and their precursors and cutting agents into the streets of America. And for the first time that I can remember, we are charging these businesses and enterprises, not just in America, but in mainland China, and seizing their operational necessity to have money by seizing their cryptocurrency wallets. We're also equally important to protecting the homeland. We know we have a no-fail mission. We're committed to keeping our nation safe from terrorism, cyber attacks, and foreign adversaries. Whether stopping threats inspired by foreign terrorist organizations or lone wolf actors, or sponsored by hostile nation states. This year, we've already made nearly 60 counterintelligence arrests. 60 counterintelligence arrests this year alone is a 30% increase from the same time period last year for the CI work at the FBI. I'm proud when we can share our successes, such as when an espionage charge was brought against an active duty U.S. Navy sailor caught spying for the People's Republic of China. But I want the American people to know the FBI is protecting the homeland from foreign adversaries in a way that will never make the news, and a lot of the good work that they do will never be able to discuss in this setting. We're working on cyber threats. We're attacking malware infrastructure, going after ransomware attackers, delivering a new partnership with the private public sector engagements we've taken with the companies who are attacked by these foreign adversaries and nation-state actors and individual enterprise rings from around the world. We are adding Salt Typhoon, Vault Typhoon, Flax Typhoon, and so many other ransomware and cyber threats this nation faces. We're also arresting people such as Tajik National in Brooklyn, who is suspected of sending tens of thousands of dollars to support ISIS. We're going after the new form of what I refer to as modern-day terrorism in America, 764 crimes that involve harming our children by going after them online, causing self-mutilation, suicide, sexual abuse, and steering them in the wrong direction. Currently, we have 3,500 international terrorism investigations. Specifically, we have in this country 1,700 domestic terrorism investigations, a large chunk of which are nihilistic violent extremism, NVE. Those who engage in violent acts motivated by a deep hatred of society, whatever that justification they seem is. The FBI has seen a 300% increase in cases opened this year alone versus the same time last year. In the last couple of months, the FBI secured a guilty plea for a man in Tennessee who attacked an energy facility with drones and explosives. We secured the indictment of a violent Sinaloa cartel faction leader in Chicago on narco-terrorism charges. Our folks in Sacramento collaborated with domestic and international partners to secure a guilty plea for a leader of a transnational terrorist organization who solicited the murder of federal officials. But the Bureau's job is not done. I'm committed to this transparency. Mr. Chairman, you alluded to our work with Congress. To date, in the 7 months that I've been FBI director, we have produced 33,000 pages to the United States Congress, 33,000 pages. Just to put that in perspective, my predecessor in his 7-year term issued 13,000 pages to Congress, and his predecessor in his 4-year term issued 3,000 pages to Congress. I've issued 33,000 pages in 7 months, and we're going to keep going. I'm dedicated to restoring the trust that the public has and needs in the integrity at the FBI, and it's being done every day by the men and women of the FBI. Now, I know that there's a lot of talk about Epstein, and I'm here to testify that the original sin in the Epstein case was the way it was initially brought by Mr. Acosta back in 2006. The original case involved a very limited search warrant or set of search warrants and didn't take as much investigatory material it should have seized. If I were the FBI director then, it wouldn't have happened. The search warrants were limited to small time periods to include 2002 to 2005 and 1997 to 2001. Mr. Acosta allowed Epstein to enter in 2008 to a plea and non-prosecution agreement, which then the courts issued mandates and protective orders legally prohibiting anyone from ever seeing that material ever again without the permission of the court. The non-prosecution agreements also barred future prosecutions for those involved at that time of those individuals. Still, this administration, at the direction of President Trump, has done more to turn over all the credible information we are legally able to do so, and we will continue to work with Congress to achieve that end. Under the direction of the President, thank you for your support for our mission to working to jointly deliver transparency and congressional oversight to the United States. Lastly, I want to close with the President's initiative here in Washington, D.C. as an example of what we're doing around the country. And I think our next city is Memphis. 21,000 arrests in D.C. with our federal partners, a huge decrease in violent crime, 60% decrease in gun crimes in Washington, D.C. in the last month, 74% decrease in carjackings in Washington, D.C. in the last month, 53% decrease in homicides in Washington, D.C. in the last month. The drugs are disappearing, people are freely walking around the states, and we're restoring the nation's capital to its glory. That work is through the interagency process that the FBI is proud to be a part of, and the initiative spearheaded by President Trump and the Attorney General. And perhaps most notably for investigations in Washington itself, it was the intelligence that the FBI gathered through our source network here in D.C. that helped us identify the suspects in the horrific murder of the D.C. intern Eric Tarpinian. We're proud to be a part of that investigation. We're proud to put the resources to bear of the FBI. And in closing, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee and Ranking Member Durbin, I'm honored to be the 9th director of the FBI. I'm not going anywhere. If you want to criticize my 16 years of service, please bring it on. Over to you.
I've observed when, whether it's Republican or Democrats, want a yes or no answer, that the witness and the senators talking over each other. So I thought what I'd do this time, rather than have that happen, if there's something you don't get a chance to answer because of the demeanor of a Republican or Democrat senator, before we, when we get done with that questioner, I'd give you a chance to fill in if there's something you didn't get a chance to say. Since 2019, I've sought greater transparency about Jeffrey Epstein and the government handling of the matter. I've continued to investigate during this Congress. Director Patel, was Jeffrey Epstein an intelligence asset for the United States government or the foreign government? And if so, which agencies or governments?
Mr. Chairman, I can only speak to the FBI as the director of the FBI, and Mr. Epstein was not a source for the FBI.
Okay. Would you commit to providing my office with all classified, non-classified records relating to the Epstein matter?
I will commit to providing all records I'm legally permitted to do so under the court orders.
It seems to me that I accept your answer to my question, but the broader intelligence community ought to answer these questions as well. Victims deserve an answer. Regarding the initial FBI 1023 document that I made public last Congress, that document mentioned 1, text messages, 2, audio recordings, and 3, financial records that allegedly proved a bribery scheme with the Biden family and foreign interests. Regarding those records, did the Ray FBI make any effort to determine whether they existed? Did the Ray FBI make any effort to obtain those records?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Chairman.
Since this matter hasn't been fully investigated, the FBI has an obligation to the public to do exactly that and figure out why it wasn't investigated. Next question. I've done a lot of oversight relating to sexual misconduct by the FBI agents. In fact, I believe this is something I discussed with Ray, one of his appearances before this committee. According to the FBI Inspection Division, it opened nearly 300 investigations based on sexual misconduct referrals between 2017 and 2024. According to whistleblowers, the Biden-Ray FBI totally dropped the ball on this question. One credible accusation of sexual misconduct is too many, of course. Are you committed to reviewing the Bureau's policies to ensure responsible responses to credible allegations of misconduct, that they're swift and adequately protect victims?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Relating to a similar subject, during child crimes and sexual misconduct related investigations, are any private sector companies less than cooperative with you? What improvements in information sharing need to be made to catch those criminals?
Mr. Chairman, we can always do better with their private sector companies. I've reached out to the leaders of most of them, asking them to provide more material so that we can be responsive and take legal action and protect the youth of this country. I'm happy to discuss, possible legislation that we can do to allow for these companies to continue.
Yeah. Say maybe 1 inch up on the microphone.
Sorry.
I think you're close enough, but I think it's just a little bit lower. When you raise your head, it's difficult to hear. Director Patel, since 2021, I've raised concerns about the Biden administration failure to properly vet Afghan evacuees. Director Gabbard informed my office that as of August 2022, approximately 1,600 evacuees located in the United States had ties to terrorism and other derogatory information. That's why I and many others have opposed bills giving blanket approval. Are you aware of what steps your predecessor took to investigate these evacuees? And what steps have you taken to investigate them? And what, if any, national security concerns still exist?
Mr. Chairman, I can't speak to the steps my predecessor took, but I will make sure we do a sweeping review and get back to you on that. As far as the Afghan refugees and evacuees, as during my tenure, we are going through the databases to make sure that no known or suspected terrorists enter this country to harm our nation. And also, is my resolve as FBI director, one of the first acts we undertook was a manhunt of one of the Abbey Gate bombers and leaders in that crime spree that killed 13 brave Americans. And within 2 weeks, we caught one of the leaders of the Abbey Gate bomber and brought him to justice here in 2 weeks from Pakistan. And so my commitment to you on Afghanistan in all matters is complete and without border.
Yeah. Through my and other investigations, we found that the Biden administration lost thousands of undocumented children. We never heard a peep from senators wanting to help find them, even after I invited them to do so. In September 2025, the Trump Health and Human Services announced the creation of an interagency crime coordinator cell to find these and other missing children. That interagency group reportedly includes your agency. What resources and personnel have the FBI assigned to this new interagency effort, and what steps have the FBI taken to assist in locating missing children that the incompetent Biden administration lost?
Protecting our youth is maybe the top priority for the FBI. As it specifically relates to your question, Mr. Chairman, as I stated, we've surged resources not just to this cell, but across the nation to our FBI's field office to locate children who have been trafficked, who have been victims of sexual abuse. And we have located 4,700 children in the 7 months since I've been FBI director. And that is a 35% increase from the same time period last year. And we're not stopping, and we're committed to doing that work on our tribal lands as well. And we are finding victims of child trafficking and child abuse every county and every district, and we're not going to stop.
Okay. As I mentioned during my opening, I'm releasing documents with Senator Johnson about Arctic frost. Specifically, the documents show its scope expanded to include 92 Republican organizations. From evidence that I've seen, it looks to me like another political hit job against Republicans. What steps has the FBI taken to make sure improperly predicated investigations and weaponizations like this don't happen again?
The simple answer, Mr. Chairman, is the FBI will only bring cases that are based in fact and law and have a legal basis to do so. And anyone that does otherwise will not be employed at the FBI. We are doing a prospective and retrospective analyses of individuals who may have weaponized the department and the agency. And as I've committed to you during my confirmation hearing and my conversations with you, this FBI will not be weaponized anymore in either side of the aisle.
In June of this year, I raised concerns about the FBI's use of restricted access and prohibited access systems. According to the FBI, quote, when search teams that exist in a prohibited access status cases are searched in Sentinel, the particular search will receive a false negative Sentinel search response, end of quote. Clearly, this is not only affects FBI agents, it impacts congressional requests and court cases, and the Biden administration used it to thwart oversight. How are you ensuring that restricted access and prohibited access files are produced to Congress during court cases? And have you identified any Biden family records in restricted and prohibited status?
As I've committed to you with my transparency initiative, whether it's restrictive or prohibited, every single thing we can legally provide to Congress, we will. We've also restructured how these restrictive and prohibited cases are labeled and provided access to more people in the chain of command so that more people have knowledge of what these restricted and prohibited cases are, including myself and the deputy.
Do you commit to providing any records that are available?
I do, sir.
You publicly said that your team, quote, found a room that Comey and others hid from the world in the Hoover Building, full of documents and computer hard drives no one had ever seen or heard of. That's a quote from you. I've received a whistleblower disclosure that the room contained some information kept outside the FBI record keeping. I also have been informed via a whistleblower disclosure that the room included materials related to Special Counsel Mueller, former Director James Comey, and other documents maintained outside of the FBI. Has the FBI now reviewed and analyzed those records? Has the FBI properly recorded the documents? And these records are clearly responsive to my, as well as my colleagues' congressional requests. What steps have you taken to ensure all responsive records are produced to Congress? That has to be my last question.
What's supposed to happen is leadership at the FBI is supposed to, pursuant to the Records Act, correctly store these records at our Information Management Division, IMD. In this room, we found a plethora of hard drives, computers, hard documents, soft documents that were not so recorded, a voluminous amount of information. So we are continuously processing that information. So A, we subscribe to the Records Act and commit that those records will be kept permanently at the FBI. 2, we are reviewing those materials. A lot of those materials are related to ongoing investigations. And 3, we are on a rolling basis providing Congress the documents that we can, and we will continue to do so.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, in addition to the extensive purge of nonpartisan career FBI official reports indicate that dozens of remaining officials have been subjected to polygraph exams to test their loyalty. My understanding is that approximately 40 officials have been asked to sit for a polygraph during your administration, and several have been asked whether they have ever made negative comments about you. Director Patel, FBI agents pledge their loyalty to the Constitution of the United States, not you personally. What is the basis for requiring polygraph exams of your workforce and asking them if they've made negative comments about you?
I don't know what reports you're referring to, Ranking Member, and I reject any reporting that has false information in it, so I'm not going to respond to that. As far as polygraphs go, generally they are always and always have been utilized at the FBI to track down those that leak sensitive information and have unauthorized disclosures to the media, and we will continue to use them to ensure the integrity of the FBI.
Did any individual on your senior executive team, the director's advisory team, or who serve in the positions on the 7th floor receive disqualifying alerts on their polygraphs?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the personnel discussions that were had on a polygraph. Those are private discussions, and many of them relate to ongoing investigations.
Did you or Attorney General Bondi provide any individual with a waiver so they could remain employed after they received disqualifying alerts on their polygraphs?
I'll have to get back to you.
You don't remember that?
No, sir. My priority is protecting the American public, not getting into the weeds of polygraphs.
And to have a decent memory when you come before a committee.
I'm happy to talk about all the good work the men and women of the FBI are doing, including provided the lowest crime rate in American history. If you want to talk about how to protect the citizens, Chicago has seen a 30% reduction in its murder rate because of the men and women of the FBI.
You take credit for that?
I'll happily do that.
You
The
take credit?
interagency partners and the men and women of the Chicago PD have never been
Oh,
more
include
powerful.
local law enforcement, please.
Have you ever seen my testimony across this country where I always lead with our interagency partnerships with state and local law enforcement? It is the pillar of what I am doing. And on the 7th floor, for the first time in FBI history, I have installed police officers and sheriffs right on my 7th floor to report to us every day what's going around the country on the street level, because that is a priority of the FBI and is the only way we are going to work. I don't take credit for anything, but I will defend the men and women of the FBI and the cops that help us get it done.
You should. Director Patel, to your knowledge, did a whistleblower ever make a disclosure to Attorney General Bondi indicating that the New York field office was withholding Epstein-related records?
I'm not familiar with that whistleblower.
You know that there was such a whistleblower?
I'm not familiar with that whistleblower.
In response to the blowback she received, Attorney General Bondi also pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July, when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memorandum stating there is no incriminating client list. Why was this July 7th memorandum unsigned?
Would you prefer I've used AutoPen?
Why was it
The
unsigned?
memorandum had the insignia of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And in our effort to secure transparency for the American people, because the 3 prior administrations had not done so, we conducted an exhaustive search of everything related to the Epstein cases, and we produced what was legally and permissibly able to be produced to Congress and the American public.
So
And
did
there's
you
a congressional
did you-
subpoena, and we're continuing to do
You
so.
personally direct that investigation so that you would sign such a,
Did I personally direct what investigation?
of the Epstein records for any reference to President Trump?
Again, you are citing reporting that I think is baseless. We conducted an investigation of the Epstein case files pursuant to the direction of the President of the administration to provide all credible information, and we are working with Congress pursuant to a congressional subpoena to turn over all the documents we can. All
at-
individuals.
Who
were
at
cited.
DOJ and FBI was responsible for its drafting and conclusions?
Many individuals at the Department of Justice and the FBI are
There was
responsible.
no lead person?
The Attorney General leads the Department of Justice, and I lead the FBI.
So the Attorney General was responsible for that?
The Attorney General leads the Department of Justice.
Director Patel, much like you, Deputy Director Dan Bongino was a conspiracy theorist who built a lucrative career making inflammatory and unsubstantiated statements about the FBI that would be disqualifying in any administration that cared about nonpartisan law enforcement. For instance, Mr. Bongino called the placement of pipe bombs outside the DNC and RNC headquarters on January 6, quote, an inside job, and went on to say this was a setup. I have zero doubt, and whoever goes into the FBI, you better get an answer about why. Director Patel, you and Deputy Director Bongino are now leading the FBI. What is the evidence to suggest the pipe bombs placed outside of the DNC and RNC on January 6 were an inside job?
I appreciate the opportunity to discuss Director Bongino's mine record. So many on this committee and the media jettison our 31 years of public service
Can
prior
you
to
answer the
taking.
question, sir?
I'm answering the question. You're questioning the integrity of the Deputy Director of the
Asking
FBI
you
and
if
mine.
you found
And
any
I'm going to
evidence.
answer the question.
I'm
The pipe bomb
asking-
investigation is ongoing, and I'm not going to discuss the
Ongoing?
details of the pipe bomb investigation. Mr. Bongino was a Secret Service agent for 15 years, a police officer for 5. I served this country in multiple administrations for 16 years. We were also private citizens, and we are now back in government service. And what we have the ability to do is set aside our personal beliefs to deliver the mission of justice for this country, and we're doing it day in and day out. And I find it disgusting that everyone and anyone would jettison our 31 years of combined experience that is now at the helm of the FBI, delivering historic results at historic speeds for the American people.
So you have no evidence?
I got a lot of evidence, and I'll give it to you when I can.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. There's a New York Times story this morning about Chris Meyer. As I understand it, he was your personal pilot, at least for some period of time. Mr. Meyer has quite a record himself. Flew over 350 hours as an Air Force pilot on 3 aircraft types in Afghanistan. Mr. Jardina, another former FBI agent, a 1999 graduate of U.S. Naval Academy, commanded 100 Marines in combat during the 2003 invasion of Iraq, participated in several firefights, followed up with 2011 deployment as a reservist to Afghanistan, where he interrogated senior Taliban officials. It appears that you terminated these 2 agents. Why?
I'm not going to get into personnel decisions that we made.
So you're not accountable for your decisions to take people who've served our country so admirably and terminate them without any cause?
That's a
I'll tell you
one-sided story. Anyone that has
Well,
been
then,
terminated from
so
the
tell
FBI,
your-
generally
tell your
speaking,
side of the story.
failed to meet the needs of the FBI and uphold their constitutional duties. And you providing a one-sided story from your perch is absolutely disgraceful, because the men and women of the FBI deserve better. And your attack on the current leadership of the men and women of the FBI is equally disgraceful, because now you're attacking the leaders that are our brave SACs in
Let
the
me tell you
field
what's
who are
disgraceful.
doing the job that this
Disgraceful.
country needs.
It's
And we will
disgraceful.
continue to do it.
Excuse me, it's disgraceful when Mr. Meyer and Mr. Jardina, who served our country so well, are terminated apparently because of the rants of a broadcaster.
That is your opinion. It is not a fact.
Well, it's certainly my opinion I can back up with fact. Let me ask you to explain the situation in Baltimore, if you will. did you read the story about the termination of the project in Baltimore?
Which story?
764 Group?
Sorry. Which story?
764 Group, the Baltimore agents were investigating. Are you familiar with that?
No, sir.
Well, I'm not going to go into detail. It would take too long to do it. But apparently that this group, 764, a nihilistic, violent extremist group, seeks to blackmail children to perform vile acts on a camera under investigation by Baltimore, which was terminated by you. I'd like you to respond in writing, if you will, as to the circumstances of that termination.
Sure. Our operations against NVEs, as you're referring to, has been historically high, and we've taken down multiple NVE rings, including 764 rings, who are harming children and causing them to be mutilated and
Last
commit
question.
suicide.
Can you explain why you are eliminating the requirements for a college degree for your agents?
I appreciate the opportunity to address that. You said in your opening statement, we are reducing the training requirements at Quantico. We are not. We are expanding them. You are referring to an 1811 crossover program because I believe the men and women of places like the DEA, the ATF, and the Marshal Service and the Secret Service who want to work at the FBI should deserve that opportunity in a shortened, converged program, which we provided. We are also keeping the 18-week BFTC as is traditionally at the FBI. So we're not reducing any requirements. We are increasing those that we bring into the FBI.
Did you change any of the requirements on college degrees?
We are allowing police officers who have served for a number of years to come into the FBI who did not obtain the requisite college degree to apply to be federal agents because we feel they have the street level experience we need to conduct this mission.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I have to respond to this business about you not treating employees properly because I served under the previous administration when Democrats willingly turned a blind eye to Biden administration retaliation against my whistleblowers. They didn't get due process when their careers and lives were upended. I'm talking about people like Dina Perkins, Jeffrey Veltri, Timothy Dunnan were removed from their positions. Several whistleblowers were reported that they targeted FBI employees for their political beliefs by suspending and revoking security clearances. One FBI whistleblower said that Perkins, Vetri, Dunnan, and other FBI leaderships were, quote, responsible for what happened to me and my family, ensuring that they no longer work at the FBI isn't retribution, it's responsible leadership. Another whistleblower that is a registered Democrat said they spoke out against abuses in security clearances processes committed by FBI senior leaders, particularly Veltri and Perkins. Then Perkins and Dunnan suspended their security clearances and put them in unpaid leave. I'm going to put some more examples like this in the record so I don't take up a lot of time for my colleagues. Senator Graham.
Thanks, Senator Graham. Welcome to the committee. The numbers sort of speak for themselves. You've done a lot in a small period of time. So all those folks out there making this happen, thank them for me.
Well, sir.
As to how to be an FBI agent, you've made a decision that local law enforcement folks, people who have served in law enforcement without a college degree are able to apply now. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Makes sense to me. So experience out in the field might be as valuable as a college degree, believe it or not. Venezuela. We're blowing boats out of the water in the Caribbean because they're connected to international narco-terrorist groups. Is that correct?
Yes, that mission is being led by the Department of Defense, sir.
Okay. What legal authority do we have to do that?
Sir, I would defer the questions on legal authority to the Attorney General and the department.
Fair enough. Do you believe that Maduro runs a narco-terrorism state in Venezuela based on?
I believe based on the intelligence and prosecutions and investigations we are currently running, a large portion of the cocaine that exits out of South America, its origination point is in Venezuela, and using transshipment points through Haiti, they're using the navigable waterways in the Caribbean to the end state delivery, which is the United States of America, and we will hunt down every single one of those narco traffickers with the authorities.
There's
we
some
have.
actual indictments of Maduro as an individual for being involved in that. Is that correct?
Senator, I think you're referring to the DEA indictment on that one.
Right. So I guess the point is, would it be fair to say that Venezuela is a good candidate to be labeled as a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law?
Senator, from my perch, we will provide the intelligence necessary for anyone who meets the threshold to be a state sponsor of terrorism, and this administration has
I
expanded
think
it.
they are, so we'll be going down that road. China, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being nothing, 10 being great, how is China helping with the fentanyl problem here in the United States?
Under this administration, we have taken, as I highlighted the Cincinnati case, the precursors are the problem. The fentanyl is the end state that kills American
Well,
citizens.
the precursors are made in China, right?
They're made in China. And so for the first time in a decade, I had a call with my counterpart in the MPS, the Ministry of Public Services, to attack the precursor chemical companies and have those chemicals
Is it
labeled.
too early to rate the success?
We have indicted multiple businesses, and we've also cut off the transshipment points of those precursors. They switched. Once we got on their track about their delivery routes to the Mexican drug cartels directly, they started going to India. We called the Indian authorities, and they shut down those transshipment points. So we're continuing to work with our
So
partners
China
overseas.
is helping, would you say?
They are starting to help, and we are hoping, under this administration's leadership, we can get more of
Let
their
me
help.
know, in the coming months if that continues, because if they are helping, that's a good thing.
Yes,
I think
sir.
we need to celebrate the breakthrough. If they're not, that would be a bad thing. So after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, there seems to be one refrain from everybody, and that's about the effect of social media. Do you believe that social media is one of the instruments radicalizing America and inciting violence?
Well, it's not. My belief is based on the data, and the data shows that social media is wildly out of control when it comes to
You're
radicalizing.
dead right. So what did you just say? This guy's the FBI director. He says that social media is wildly out of control. Now, free speech, we all agree with that, but you can't yell fire in the theater, right?
Yes, sir.
Free speech doesn't allow you to go online and groom a child for sexual.
No, it does not.
Okay, free speech doesn't allow you to go on the internet and basically incite somebody to kill another person, right?
Absolutely not.
So if it's illegal offline, it should be illegal online, agreed? Whatever the law is.
Yes, sir. We
Just
had a-
because you're online doesn't give you a get out of jail free card.
No, sir.
So if a parent is worried about a child being bullied on a website, what rights do they have under U.S. law?
We have to balance the rights, as you said, Senator, of free speech versus those that encroach
Is there
upon
any law
violence.
that can shut down one of these sites for bullying children or allow sexual predators on the site?
We are able to attack certain sites on the dark web. When it comes to the open internet infrastructure system, we have to reach a threshold to attack a company's position that only subscribes to violence.
Can the parents sue that company?
They can.
They can?
They can sue not the social media companies.
That's what I'm talking about.
They can sue the companies.
No, I'm talking about the social media company that gives life to this behavior.
No, you're referring to Section 230, sir.
Yeah. Would you advocate a sunsetting of Section 230 to bring more liability to the companies who send this stuff out?
I've advocated that for years.
All right. We need to do this, folks. These companies are taking content that it makes you sick, that could get you killed, get you poisoned, and there's nothing we can do about it under our law. A person can do about it because of Section 230. So if your child is being sexually groomed online or bullied online, and you go to the social media company and ask them to take it down, they refuse, you have like zero rights. How many images of sexually exploited children are purveyed every year on social media sites?
The number is astronomical. And Senator, if I can just add one step to that analysis.
Please.
It's not just what's on social media that is quote unquote real. It's the introduction of artificial intelligence and
Right.
generative AI that is creating even more child sexually abused material and even more sexually violent acts online and mimicking people.
Would you say that the way social media is structured today, really no accountability, 36 million images in 2023 of sexually exploited children, that this is a public health hazard?
It is.
Would you say that it's a mental health problem, particularly for younger people?
It absolutely is.
Do you agree that some of these sites are designed to be addictive?
I think not only are some of these sites designed to be addictive, unfortunately, the reality is some of these sites are designed to generate income, and many people are generating income based on this illegal trade.
Do you think it's now time for America to deal with this problem?
I'm all in, I have been all in, and I'm happy to work with Congress to do so.
Well, I tell you what, having the FBI director all in is great news for me, and I hope the committee will respond and that we'll be all in, trying to fix a problem that I think is doing a lot of damage to our country. When it comes to John Bolton, was there new evidence involved in the raid on his home?
Sir, that investigation is very much ongoing. As you know, there was a raid of his house pursuant to a legal
Was there a
search
warrant obtained to go in?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay. All right.
We're looking to have that search warrant unsealed at the
Yeah,
appropriate
I
time.
think that would be good, quite frankly. In December 2023, Director Wray said he sees blinking lights everywhere regarding to foreign terrorist threats against our homeland. How would you characterize the state of threats to our homeland by foreign terrorist groups?
Foreign terrorist organizations have adapted and started utilizing online platforms, and so is the FBI. And so while they are adapting and expanding how they harm our country, we have as well. They have not stopped. There's been a resurgence in places like West Africa and elsewhere of foreign terrorist organizations, and also the newly emboldened drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. It's going to take a whole of government approach to get.
Does Hezbollah fall within that group?
Yes, sir.
So Hezbollah is involved in not only terrorism, but narco-terrorism?
Yes, sir.
So do you consider Hezbollah a threat to the United States?
Absolutely.
All right, finally, do you have enough people
Sorry.
to do all this? Do you need more people? You're involved in a lot of things, and the numbers speak for themselves. You have FBI agents helping here in Washington, D.C. You have FBI agents helping in illegal immigration. That's good. You've got a chance here to tell us if you need more people. Seems to me that the threat level of this country is pretty high right now. You got thousands of domestic terrorism cases. How many are being investigated?
I think 3,500 off the top of my head.
3,500, okay. Anyway, it seems your plate's pretty full. I would urge you to get with your people, and if you think you need more people, now's the time to do it. It would be a shame to miss an opportunity to plus up the FBI if the threats justified it. Will you look?
I will look, sir.
Okay, but are you comfortable you have enough people right now?
Right now, I'm comfortable with the reallocation of agents and personnel outside of Washington, D.C. and plussing up states like South Carolina in double-digit numbers, and I'll get back with my team on this one.
Thank you for your service.
Senator Whitehouse.
Boy, is my timing good.
It is very good.
Director Patel, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
When you were here for your confirmation, we talked about your so-called enemies list. It appears to me that there have been adverse actions of various kinds taken against about 20 of the 60 people on your enemies list. You've been in office for 7 months. At that rate, you've got 14 months until you've hit all 60. Can you explain that?
Again, that is an entirely inaccurate presupposition. I do not have an enemies list. You can continue to characterize it as you wish. The only actions we take, generally speaking, for personnel at the FBI are ones based on merit and qualification and your ability to uphold your constitutional duty. You fall short, you don't work there anymore.
Well, there was a list. You don't like it to be called an enemies list, and it had about 60 names, and about 20 have had an adverse action. So those are, I think, pretty clear facts. Let me move on to your grand jury testimony, which we also talked about